a second. I saw her for a second, and now she's gone away. She's getting a call. She's gonna be with us in a second. I see Tara Dublin waiting in the wings. But is she? Oh, there she is. Hold on. Now I'm almost there. Give me 1 second. Switch this over. We're almost there. Look out. We dancing. We partying. It's a groove. It's a crazy morning. It's a crazy, crazy morning. And I'm glad we're getting it happening. Hold on 1 second. I got to do one thing. And we're ready to roll. Chat room, how you doing? You're lining up. You're getting in there. Look at this groove. We've grown a bunch of people. Okay, let's go to me and the gift.
Nobody can turn on Tara.
No, yeah, yes we can. It's not as hard as you think.
No, she's dead inside. She is so dead inside. I had a fight with my friends about this yesterday. It's fine. I can hear you. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Tommy, can you see me?
Yeah.
Can you feel me near you?
Oh yes, I can feel you. And the chat room can as well. And we're about to transition into
chat room. Can you feel me?
All right, that's looking good. All right, and here she is, ladies and gentlemen. Hey. Look at that. Ta-da! It's Tara Dublin. Nice shirt, by the way. Fantastic. I like it.
Thank you so much.
I'm a big fan. I'm almost ready to run into the other room and get my Dark Brandon sticker that I got as part of my little package of stuff that I want to. I honest to God, I wish they sold them by the roll. Like Biden campaign, do me a favor. I know it's going to end up being a bit of a story, especially on Fox News, that, you know, we're a cult, not their cult. MAGA's a cult. But, you know, we keep calling them a cult, but we're really a cult. But I happen to think that it's the perfect way to irritate just the right people. And walking around sticking, Dark Brandon stickers on stuff would be one way to do that. And $3 a pop, that's too much.
I'm so ready to go. I made notes for today.
Oh, dear. Well, there's lots of news. Obviously, starting off, we have to talk about the situation in Israel that's happening.
Yes, we do.
The biggest part of this, and I think this is a cautionary tale for everybody who has been, I think, in line with how you and I feel about all of this, in that I lean towards peace, but I try not to have a naive concept of what that means, or the reality that's involved in achieving peace, that gives you this kind of pie in the sky utopian idea of if everybody would just lay down their guns, everybody would just lay down their guns. And the reality is that is not happening anytime soon in big portions of the country. Pardon me, I'm going to turn off that alert because it will be annoying after a while.
I keep hearing, isn't there some book that everyone likes to quote that has stories in it that are basically about how everyone's supposed to let each other live in peace or something? Isn't that the root of only every world religion?
No, it isn't.
Where it's like, it isn't supposed to be, we're supposed to let each other live and live in peace?
No,
isn't that part of it?
No.
To others?
That's part. You're thinking of the Old Testament, and you're also sort of mixing it up with Buddhist philosophy, which Buddhism is not a religion. Buddhism is
that's why I like it.
Spiritual system of moral hygiene. It can be turned into a religion, and you can deify the Buddha and the like, which is why I think one of the great Buddhist teachers said, if you meet Buddha on the road, kill him, because he's clearly not the Buddha, and you're clearly not capable of understanding what you think you are, so you're as much a danger to anybody as anybody else.
Right.
And so, no, in terms of the Old Testament, absolutely not. And the New Testament itself, specifically, and you could say whether this was translation or whether this was the Roman Caesar who eventually became the first pope, trying to transition away from a physical fighting way of expressing your power in the world to an ideological way of doing it, which involved a lot of not fighting. So the construction by whatever Caesar's in the book Caesar's Messiah, they talk about how he had people craft the New Testament was fully made up to kind of concoct.
I'm sorry, what is that noise that I keep hearing where it's like, da-da?
I think I fixed that. It should have gone away now. Yeah.
I think
I
only you and I can hear
oh
it. So
yes, hold on one second. I'll show you what it is. It's
not that it isn't like a lovely punctuation of everything you're saying, but it's distracting me from everything that you're
got it.
saying.
All right, I think that should get rid of it. It should be all right. It should
Okay.
be gone now for you. So
All right.
so first of all, on a religious sense, no. The great
Oh
religions of the
well.
world are not ministers of peace in any way. In many ways, they were the original tribal argument documents. Why we have a right to be on Earth, and why other people who try to stop us from being on Earth because of who we are deserve to be wiped out. So saith
Aha.
big spaghetti man in the sky. So
Right. Well, as I wrote in my notes, when in doubt, just blame the Jews. Just do that. Just
sure.
blame
Well,
the.
that
You
yeah,
can do that because
yeah,
we
that's a
did
big one.
everything wrong. It's all. I'm sorry, I hit my phone in my enthusiasm.
Exasperation. I understand it.
All of that. Everything's our fault, and
Yeah.
it's always easier to just find a scapegoat than live in reality.
Mhm.
So my sky daddy can beat up your sky daddy is a weird reason to kill other people. That's a weird
Yeah.
reason.
Well, I gotta say,
I want that square footage of land more than you do, so that's a reason to kill you.
that's different though. These are two different.
I know.
It does
I mean,
not.
but they're interconnected in this particular case because people can't separate the Jews from the people who live. Like they can't separate the
From the
religious
territory.
aspect from the territory. They can't separate.
Right. Well,
they
let's
can't
start on the premise I think you
compartmentalize.
and I can agree with, that there are no magic rocks. That either the
No,
entire earth is magic or none of it is. And especially if you would fight over now granted, elements of the area where Israel is some of the only fertile farmland for hundreds of miles. It is because of its proximity to the sea. It has shipping value and stuff in the same way that Manhattan and Ellis Island and all that had that as well. So there are areas of the world that benefit from the lack of resources outside of that area, spiking the need to be in that area over living in the desert and hoping for an oasis. And the Middle East
right,
specifically, one of the reasons why the Middle East is on fire all the fucking time is because it has more of that problem than anywhere in the world.
right.
Let's just be
Also,
abundantly
I'm sorry
clear.
if you can hear my arch nemesis, the leaf blower man, but the leaf blower
Nope.
man is right under my window right
You
now. So.
sound great. We're not worried at all. And chat room, by the
Well,
way,
then
hello.
there goes that
Hi.
note. Okay.
Yes, we don't. Yeah, we're good. So
It's a RIP Portland thing. All right. Okay.
right.
Continue.
And understand that there are regional and agricultural and resource reasons why people fight wars that are a lot more entrenched than the religious aspect. The problem is that the leaders who have wanted control over certain resources find it very hard to motivate people who are relatively comfortable. Oops, we lost her for a second. There she is. She's back. Who
No,
are
I'm here. I have my
Yeah.
do not disturb on, and my do not disturb. Hi, my do
Hi.
not disturb is on, and yet a phone call got through. I don't know why. I hate.
They're on your
everything.
special list. They're on your special list.
Tim Apple, get to work. All right. Anyway,
So understand that over the centuries, if you have people who because the devil is better than the devil you don't, and that also applies to going to war. People will rather suffer with the mild starvation or the low resources that they have rather than try to march on somebody else and take all their shit because they might die in the process. So it's like fewer calories a day versus getting murdered in a field somewhere. That's not a difficult balance to make. So oftentimes nationalism or religious fervor or some particular ideology or a belief that life, which sucks, will be better after you die has been a motivating factor for humanity and and control psychology on the planet forever. For since people started thinking that thunder was God bowling in heaven, right? And so there are a couple of issues that go beyond that part of it that I think you've got a mix of that happening right now in a perfect way. Whereas the Israelis specifically are talking about, a Jewish homeland after World War II. That whole structure was always going to be a problem for the people who had, quite frankly, back and forth taken over the area. There was this back and forth between forces for years. So let's not pretend that that the Israeli state, the Jewish state was created and broomed Palestinians out of an area there. They had been there since they magically appeared on Earth 10,000 years ago. And the indigenous idea that whoever was there last before white people showed up or a particular group showed up were the indigenous people of that place. Those people wiped out the people that were there before them, whether they were the Hittites or whether they were the Sakari Jews or whether they were the, the Israelites or whether they were, parts of fucking, I don't know, Roman adventurism in the area. Okay. So there is no beginning in any of this shit. And so how you act now is how you act now.
Right.
And that's the key thing. And the biggest thing that is standing out to me in what's being spoken about now, and I think the lesson to be learned comes from this little story, which I'm going to cut to the screen. And I know you won't be able to see it that well, but I will read it to you as far as the title of this: How Hamas Duped Israel as it Planned Devastating Attack. Okay,
I shared that on my Twitter today as well.
Okay, this is all over the place in like the Indian news for whatever reason is carrying it very heavily right now, and it's because of their relationship with Pakistan and Pakistan's relationship with Iran. So there's a reason why they have kind of a dog in this fight, and they want to make this point. But it's true. Hamas bragged today or last night or whatever, yesterday, that they intentionally duped the Israelis into thinking that the stability of the economy and the normalization was actually their focus for the last 4 years.
Yeah, they've been playing the long game.
Yes. All during, Jared Kushner's Abraham Accord stuff, that all rolled into it as well. But they trained for the attack in open sight. They built a fake Jewish settlement that they were going to attack, and everybody in Israel at that point thought, well, that's just how they posture. But in reality, they're making headway. They're taking baby steps, and we will give them the benefit of the doubt. And largely that was based on two reasons. One, the utter humanity of Israelis. No matter what you think of Netanyahu, the average Israeli isn't interested in sort of like all out blatant war for no particular purpose. But also predicating on United States aid, because increasingly Israel with the whatever BDS movement, there has been a push to use an economic strong arming to leverage Israel to behave better in terms of how it treats the Palestinians, and so they have been making this point. And it turns out that during that entire time, where we in the West were holding Israel's arm behind their back to make sure that they started behaving like we think they are, and referring to Israel as an apartheid state, and all the what I would argue is largely democratic talking points on our side of the aisle, because we believe that most people want the good of this situation. And I still think that's true, but that doesn't mean that's how it's going to work out. That in that process, we effectively insisted that Israel drop their guard. And Hamas, instead of going, hey, look, they're dropping their guard, and the United States is being more, they're pushing for a two-state solution, and they're going back. We've got a new Jimmy Carter in office who might actually, make this happen, where we can have a two-state solution, which has fallen back in many ways to what happened under Carter, which is the Iranians who back the Palestinians, specifically Hamas, not all of Palestinians, but Hezbollah in the north and Lebanon, and Hamas inside in the Palestinian territories. Did the exact same thing under Carter. We don't want a two-state solution. We want to take over the whole thing. And if there is a chance at peace, we must scuttle it. We must destroy it. This is the response of Hamas. And they specifically are now bragging that, according to this, a careful campaign of deception ensured Israel was caught off guard when Palestinian Islamic group Hamas launched its devastating attack, enabling a force using bulldozers, hang gliders, and motorbikes to take on the Middle East's most powerful army. Saturday's assault, the worst breach of Israel's defenses since the Arab armies waged war in 1973, followed 2 years of subterfuge by Hamas that involved keeping its military plans under wraps and convincing Israel it did not want a fight. Now, I would argue...
What are you supposed to do with that, right? Because as you said, your basic humanity wants to believe that you can
Yes.
coexist, right?
Yes.
Because if you are truly someone who is in the pursuit of living in peace, you're not
Hmm.
about dominance, you're about coexistence.
Right.
And to expect that of your fellow human beings, I think is not asking a lot. I mean, we are socialized to coexist, and yet at the same time,
We are in the United
we're not.
States.
So, but like, here's what we're learning:
Right.
peace is not profitable. Peace is not profitable, but
Yes, it
war
is.
certainly is.
No, it isn't.
It
No,
isn't.
no, no, no.
War is
No,
much more.
no. I got to tell you, like, there's elements of war that are profitable for a specific group of people, but the dominant economic powers on the world stage right now are all peace oriented. Even the energy companies in their transition towards green energy, which they're begrudgingly doing, recognize that the return on investment, the cost overhaul on dealing with Middle East oil, for example, is so high, they're willing to invest in solar farms, wind farms, tidal energy, like that's why the shift. You don't think, this is always the example I give, but you don't think Target actually cares about body positivity, do you? They started selling bigger clothes and having bigger models, bigger models in their ads and bigger, clothing store dummies in their stores because the audience tipped 60%. When America became 60% overweight, that's when the shift happened. It didn't happen out of the goodness of their heart. It didn't happen because they wanted people to feel good about themselves. It's because that's the biggest swath of their audience that they're selling to. They realize the reality of there's no going back with a big portion of the people who shop in our stores, so we're going that direction. The same thing is happening on the biggest, when war was at its most profitable, the biggest powerhouses in the world were steel factories, particularly the processing of steel and the building of items from steel, be it cars and washing machines or tanks. Right, that was the primary economic driver around World War II and post. That's why all those factories that made tanks went back to making washing machines, and why the United States did so well is because we had the only functioning factories on the fucking earth, because all the ones in Europe had been blown to smithereens because they'd been converted into making tanks and guns and shit like that. Okay. Since that time, the most profitable things on earth right now are peace dividend things. Soda, fucking toys and phones and computers and computer chips and all that kind of stuff. The market, even with $1 trillion defense budget, for the United States, and which eclipses the rest of the world by a factor of 6, the rest of our market are in the United States. All $26 trillion of it, about $15 trillion of it is consumer goods that have nothing to do with military exercises anywhere in the world. And that wasn't true 50, 60 years ago. It is now. And that's why the shift in where the war is coming from is now coming from the Russias, the Irans of the world directly. Because they don't have that capability. They're still in that 60-year-old system. They still make that shit.
Fair enough. And then but then when we are talking about all of these things, when the mainstream media is talking about all of these things, if they were as educated as you and were able to communicate that as effectively to their audiences as you are able to communicate it to yours, then the approach would not be fuck Joe Biden, this is all his fault.
Right.
Well, you already are, Hal. But my point being, and the reason I wrote that rant about the mainstream media not knowing how to report things accurately because they're so addicted to the rage cycle, is they're never going to lead with the positive stuff. They're always going to lead with the stuff that's going to scare people the most, to hook them and keep them living at threat level midnight, instead of saying, here's how Joe Biden is trying to actually take care of you at a time when you are more scared than you have ever been. So
and
if
by the
they
way,
could frame it like that, that'd be great.
Right. Arguably safer than you have ever been, ironically enough. But the issue that you have, I think, the Hamas-Israel situation makes my exact point, in that Israel recognized that their financial well-being and their safety as a nation was predicated more on economic normalization than on war. So that's how they got suckered into it. The problem they have is that that's not how Hamas feels about it, because nobody has a Palestinian cell phone. Nobody has a Palestinian motorboat engine. Nobody has there's nothing coming out of those areas, because the entirety of their existence for the last 60 years has been an ideological fight over religious beliefs. And the screams of Allahu Akbar as they shoot up a music festival is the prime example of why there is a ton of people making a what killed these Israelis was naivete. That's the problem that we're in. We want to believe, and I believe on an interpersonal level, human to human, if somebody hasn't been, indoctrinated and brought up as a child soldier, for example, that most people, but for a translator on their phone, could talk to this human being and share a meal with them. That's how most people operate in the world. And it's still true. There's 8 billion plus people on the fucking planet, and most of them are getting along just fine. The issue you have is when these things rise up, is that you have to deal with them before lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people die, right?
Yeah. That's the hope anyway, right?
Yes.
I can disagree with a lot of different people's takes on things, but I want them to live to see the end of the day every day.
Exactly. That's what democracy is about. And by the way,
coexistence.
Right. When we're talking about the deification of Donald Trump by his supporters, and the sort of similarities between is a movement towards Waco, Jonestown, or Nazism, when and in a lot of ways it has, with the QAnon factor, has as much in common with the sort of the Hamas impulse, which again, there's every reason to believe that Jan 6 was one of the ways that like Hamas and others thought, well, this is the time to go. If somebody's willing to storm the steps of the U.S. Capitol, obviously we can take Israel. That's right. And the issue that they have right now is they caused a worm to turn. This tactic by Hamas to trick Israel into lowering their guard means their guard will never be lowered again. And this is a very similar thing to what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. Russia is, tricked everyone into lowering their guard and pleading poverty and weakness underneath an umbrella of mutual assured destruction, whatever the fuck that is, and ended up using it to attack Chechnya, Georgia, and Ukraine. And there's a similar waffling going on, although I would say by different people for different reasons, around supporting Ukraine in a way that we should just give this territory to Russia, because if we just do that, everything will be back to normal and it'll be fine. Instead of them taking it as, no, that was a salami slice, we're taking the next slice. And yeah. And that's what's happening.
How do you at this stage of the game even say cut Putin any slack? It's all right, and all roads are leading to Putin, like Hillary said, because she was fucking right about fucking everything else.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All roads lead to Putin. Trump has been his puppet, not just in the last 8 years, but well before that, because Russians are patient, and they will play the long. They will play the long game.
Yeah, Mark Burnett went to Russia to do a reality show about Vladimir Putin, if you'll recall. Didn't end up doing it, but came back with the idea for a show with Donald Trump. Curious, isn't that? Yeah. And then
isn't it interesting also that Donald Trump never really talked about running for president until after getting extra Putin-y? You know what I'm saying? Like after, and then it was all of a sudden he's the leading candidate. All of a sudden,
right. Well, and there was a period where there was a belief that he could manipulate what were effectively the solution of corporate Democrats and run as a Democrat in the 90s or something like that. There was some, those kind of stories at one point. She's getting calls again. She's very popular. She's very popular, this Tara Dublin. By the way,
honestly, can somebody please tell me? I put on my do not disturb, and yet they continue to disturb me. What am I not doing on my Apple iPhone?
Because everyone's on your favorites list that calls you, because that's how you operate.
No, these are numbers I don't even know. These are fucking telemarketers or whatever trying to. I don't know I don't know any of these numbers.
I will run you through your settings later, but I can't do it right now because we're on the air. But I'll run you through the whole thing. I guarantee after the show.
She's only this technically savvy, but I think if you put on your do not disturb, no one's supposed to be able to disturb you.
I'm named after a computer, so I'm completely good. We'll figure it out.
Exactly, which is why your name comes up in all caps every time Andrea and I text. Andrea. I don't know how
Andrea. I think we'll go with Andrea.
Andrea. Yeah. But every time we text and she's like, let me ask Hal, and it always comes out in all caps because Hal was the computer in 2001.
Right.
You're taking over. Rightly so.
Yes.
Anyway,
so
Trump fucking ruining everything.
Yes. So we will.
I'm just going through my notes. We already did.
No, it's good. The balance on this situation being is a recognition of imbalance, and I think that's very hard for people who have been pushing for peace as long as we have, because I marched against the Iraq war. I thought it was wrong. I stand by my actions at the time. I pushed back on everybody saying that America wanted to do this and America wanted. And I was like, nope, the Project for a New American Century wanted to do this. I didn't want to invade, Iraq or whatever. I thought John Kerry was right. It's in the business of Interpol. Should have been handled on a law and order level. And because it was, yes, it was a terrorist act, but so was, Oklahoma City, and we didn't bomb fucking Oklahoma or a bunch of militia group, weekend warrior camps in fucking Michigan, right? We just set the cops on them and caught the people. So, and eventually they met theirs. And we didn't cause a cascading, rolling blowback machine for decades afterwards. So this is the issue with the concern that I have around this is that scorched earth will be the response from the Israelis, because Hamas is now openly mocking the Israelis for believing in peace.
And what are you supposed to do with something like that? And look at the GOP response, of course. They're like, this is good for us. And it's like,
but it isn't, though, because Matt Gaetz and everybody is holding up funding. And I got news for you, folks. Any funding for helping Israel deal with this is going to be tied to Ukraine funding as well. And these assholes are going to find themselves in a Gordian knot, yelling about how some people deserve to be invaded, but others don't. And Olga in our chat saying suicide by IDF. And it's not, that's what's going to happen. I don't think it's what they expected.
Yeah. As you know, I don't currently have a job writing about politics, but and when I did, I would regularly call the members of Congress on the Republican side who were fucking our shit up and ask them, why are you doing that? Of course, they never responded. No one's paying me to write about politics, but I was so angry this morning that I did call up the Tuberville's office. I did.
Wow.
Tommy Tuberville.
Yeah.
It's not Tuberville. It's not Tuberville, but it's Tuberville, according this is Coach Tommy Tuberville, and it's a privilege to serve America. And God bless America.
Tuberville.
I do too.
A lot better.
I like calling him Tubervillain. And I essentially told him to go fuck himself twice and sideways for holding our national security hostage. Because why? Again, I don't really understand why, and I don't know why everybody's pledging loyalty to one man over their country. You're supposed to put country ahead of party. You're supposed to goddamn do your job that you were elected to do, which is protecting America, not your bank account, not your reputation, not Donald Trump, not anything but
not
the
your
country.
Base of religious donors,
not your Jesus freak cult friends,
right? Who are way outside the vast majority of your own constituents. That's the other thing, because he's going against what his constituents want, because he's going for the ones that pay, and that would be the ones that donate the most. And there's increasingly on the right there are very slim margins on where you're going to get money from, and this is the moment where I, apropos of nothing, tell everybody to drop $5 in the vote blue thing for Biden. If and when you can,
drop $5 in my Venmo, and drop $5 in Hal's Venmo.
Right.
Drop $5 to Bob when Bob comes on. Spread the love, share the wealth.
But I will say that the margins on the right, considering the Russian money has been cut off, are getting thinner and thinner. So it is driving a lot of these folks into who aren't going to get the run of the mill chamber of commerce for fucking, Simpsonsville or wherever the fuck there, is nearby, that money isn't going to go to the maggots. So the maggots are increasingly relying on thinner and thinner margins in more extreme people. So they have to speak to these extremities or they won't get any fucking money. And when it comes to running as a senator, that's the most expensive race short of president in the world. So that's where he's running afoul. So yes, $5 for Chud's Venmo. Thank you, Bald Thanos. I appreciate that. Yes, we always love and support Chud and everything that she does. She's been barking at me all morning. She got fed and water.
Cats over here, who are also like to be fed, my friends. One of them is lying on the floor right now, showing me his belly. Poor thing. Poor ignored Duke. I can't turn the phone around because maybe it'll hang up. But anyway, I made another note, like all of the hypocrisy from the GOP is it's a blight on our country, and how I still want to know, and we may never know, but I would really love to know when it was that Donald Trump how they each turned. It was like flipping over dominoes, or like that game of concentration where you just flip things over until everything matched. But like he slowly compromised them. I also compared it to Salem's Lot, and when Barlow shows up in Salem's Lot and he looks like a regular guy, because in the movie adaptations he looks like Nosferatu, but in the book, if you read the book, he looks like he's a tall, charming gentleman who he gets in, and his pal kind of lays the groundwork for him, and he walks into this small town and starts charming people and poisons them and turns them all into vampires. But that's what Trump did to the Republican Party. Yep. He showed up in a suit. Somebody normalized his arrival ahead of time, Mark Burnett, putting him on television. They normalized him on television, made him seem like a great guy who can run a business, but he ran them into the ground. How do you bankrupt 2 casinos? And anyway, so he comes in and everyone's like, a little like, oh, a new guy. Gotta be apprehensive. Oh, wait a minute. The new guy's kind of cool. New guy. Oh, wait a minute. Right. And then you're a vampire. And then you are part of his walking army of non-thinking succubi, and you are now in service to the master, because in the book they call him the master. And that's what Donald Trump is. He's the king vampire who poisoned the whole GOP, and now the GOP is out feeding on their own. Cult 45 is poisoned. They've been turned. It's cultural vampirism, or it's political vampirism, but what it is a co-opting our norms and taking them and changing them to something unrecognizable. Right. And that's my point, is that we have lost all sense of what is normal in politics, what is acceptable, where people are just like, oh, this is fine. Donald Trump is standing on the courtroom steps threatening the judge before he goes inside. That's fine. It's fine. Well, it's all fine. Again, it's all fine. Hunter Biden can't have a laptop or a gun, but Rand Paul can hand deliver a note from Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin, and that's fine. Yeah. Well, and again, this is authoritarianism's, last hurrah in a lot of ways. Right. If we can, stick together and recognize the value of democracy, and considering the sort of new flexibility that I'm seeing in some inflexible people on our side over what they've seen, like the sort of recognition of the threat, the recognition that for a while, when you have a gentleman's agreement with a group of people, and then they use that against you, there, if you fall for it again, fool me once, we're gonna get fooled again. And a lot of Kevin McCarthy. Yes. Kevin McCarthy making literally the worst deal in political history. Well, it's fascinating to me that there was a I'll look it up right now, because I looked at this article earlier. Let's see where this is. But like, how do you negotiate a deal for yourself where it's like, you can give me this job, but then you can take it away from me at any time if anybody doesn't like it? That's not a great deal after 14 rounds of losing votes. Desperate, spineless, craven, opportunistic. He was setting himself up to fail from the beginning. And then Matt Gaetz is like, well, now I'm going to get back at you for not shutting down the House Ethics Committee's investigation. I don't know how Matt Gaetz has any power. It's ridiculous. It's a shit show over there. So, and we talked about this last week. They just need to get all the poison out of our house, which is what we're going to have to do
Well, and
in
again,
the next election.
this idea, by the way, as difficult, as much of a problem as some like Democrats have been, even Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, they are not anywhere near the ballpark of Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And if the Republican Party is going to allow itself to be controlled by those people, then the idea that we can, that they're in a negotiable position and that they're somehow better than the Sinemas and Manchins, for example, if they're going to walk lockstep with Matt Gaetz, then no, then I do prefer Sinema and Manchin 80% of the time voting with Joe Biden over zero for no other reason, even with people who agree with the infrastructure bill or those kind of things, who vote for those things, but now walk lockstep with Matt Gaetz. There's no way I could say, well, third party, if you want to throw your vote third party some way. No, the Republicans need to be reminded that there are way more Democratic voters out there than they even know, and that even in safe states, the numbers are going up. Otherwise, we are responsible if they think they have a shot at slipping by at this, wolf in sheep's clothing nonsense.
No, and they don't. And they're starting to see some conservative women who all of a sudden are waking up to the fact that they've been subjugated forever. They're like,
Right.
Conservative men don't want us to have this, and conservative men don't want it. Conservative men have never wanted you to have anything.
Right.
Except an open pair of legs and a functioning uterus to pump out more white babies. That's all they've ever wanted from you. They don't want you to talk back. They don't want you to think for yourself. So what did you think you were here for?
Right.
Except to spread their propaganda and their seed. I mean, literally, that's all they want from you.
Have you seen the
body?
Have you seen the Mormon polygamy documentary on
Which one?
on Netflix? I think it's on Netflix right now. About William Jeffers or whatever his name was, the guy who moved. He was in Utah and then he moved to Texas and then he got busted.
Of him. What
Yeah.
He's a horrible rapist,
Oh,
freak.
fuck. Just
they
the whole
all
thing
are.
makes your skin crawl. But he's not the story in that situation. The story is these 65 women that grew up in and believed that stuff and corralled the other women, not letting them get out. The Ghislaine Maxwell's of the situation that do participate in that.
If you're brought up in a cult,
Right.
if you've been indoctrinated from a
Jeffrey
young age and know nothing else, I don't know, like the Catholic Church, it's fine. It's all carefully taught. We've talked about this before as well. No one's born believing anything. So somehow they get, if they're born into this or they're somehow indoctrinated into this, all groupthink is dangerous. And the Republican Party keeps showing us examples of this. Like, you can point to so many different examples of what happens when you don't think for yourself. And people, I don't know why people are afraid to challenge norms. If something scares you or you don't understand it, instead of pretending it doesn't scare you or pretending you do understand it, ask questions.
Well, that's the thing.
Challenge.
Ignorance.
I know not everyone has the mouth
there
like
is
this.
There is an artificial correlation in large swaths of the public worldwide. By the way, it's not unique. There's a big problem with what I would call the anti-American exceptionalism or the American unexceptionalism, whatever you want to call it, whatever Trumpism you want to do, whereas on the right, there's this idea that there's this jingoistic, nationalistic, flag-waving patriot idea that's not backed up by any ethics, but it comes first in how they present themselves. There is also another version of that, whereas America is always wrong. We're always the source of all bad in the world, all that kind of thing. And so the attack on norms comes from both sides, and they have strange bedfellows occasionally in terms of the Matt Gaetz accidentally siding with the squad sometimes. It's very odd that these votes for different, neither one of them have good necessarily motivations in that situation, but they have a political purpose either because their supporters want that or their own deluded idea of how things actually operate in the world. And it's a war on complexity is what it is. And it gets to that point you were making about being afraid of things you don't understand, but you can't admit it, because there's a correlation between in a lot of the South, especially where I grew up, between ignorance and innocence. If I couldn't possibly know anything about that, I couldn't have possibly done it, which is bullshit, because people who yesterday didn't think they were capable of murder people all the time.
Right.
That's just life. That's happened in the entire. You'll figure it out, believe me. And it's not about what you don't know. It's about what you know and you don't act on. Being
Exactly.
aware of your own bad impulses, being aware of your own, cul-de-sacs on a moral level or something like that, and doing your best to push back against them is what traditionally, by the way, has been the benefit of religious practice in the world. It is the thing that limits your behavior. It is, man's got to know his limitations. The famous Dirty Harry line is you're aware that you've got lines that you know you could cross, but you don't. And there are only two reasons you don't, because you have the will and the awareness and the ethical responsibility to not cross those lines, or you fear what will happen to you when you cross those lines, either by going to jail or what will happen to you in the afterlife. The problem you have is reward in the afterlife for doing something awful. Once you weaponize that in a direction, and that's been used for centuries, but it's happening now for the first time almost in a political sense. And what your reward in heaven is not, the 72 virgins or a cloud and a harp, but you will be known after you die as a hero of the cause, a martyr for the cause or whatever. And this includes people like the guy who attacked the FBI office in Cincinnati on behalf of Trump. There's a fame is heaven to these people because their God is a God of fame and notoriety. And if you martyr yourself in the name of the God of useless fame, you will go to fame heaven. And you will be, your useless existence evaporates, and suddenly your whole life had meaning up to this point because the path led you to being Donald Trump's second, on his right-hand side on the throne. And that's the scary part. McVeigh is one of the people that comes like that. Everybody who opened up on the FBI guys at Waco, for example, that were part of Koresh's idea, that's what they were looking for as well, because he was videotaping his speeches and all that kind of shit. There is an element of, and I can speak to this, but fame is more valuable than money, and has been for centuries. Fame is our new word for it, but notoriety, awareness, having the king's stamp was more important than having spears. In a lot of places, you walked around with a scroll with the king's stamp on it, you were safer than if you had 25 guys with you with bows and arrows and fucking, they were all big as a house. Right. That is the same factor. There's a modern aspect of saleable fame is effectively its own movable kingdom. And Donald Trump is kind of the for them, the third testament as far as they're concerned, and the birth of this new cult, which is get your name written on the wall in heaven, which is Instagram, I suppose, for being one of the ones who stood stupid. Up. Oh, it's ridiculous. It's
it really is. That's your legacy.
Yes,
of one
that's
being
it.
An obedient sheep to dear leader. That's your legacy.
But think of our genuine valor. If we think of like saints or someone like Mother Teresa or someone like Anne Frank or the men with and women with their names written on the Vietnam Memorial, the blank stars at CIA headquarters that represent a nameless person who you can't even tell who they were for fear that it will get people they worked with killed. Everybody wants a piece of that on the right. That's why they clamor behind cops and soldiers all the time without actually doing the fucking work. That's why Tuberville, and this is a great example, Tuberville is a fake general. He's a sports coach. And we equate, culturally, and this is true of like people who go watch the Beckham fucking documentary about football worldwide. We're Americans, we're not unique in this. We elevate sports coaches to the same level of a general that, saved all their troops and drove away a horde of mean people and killers and blah, blah, blah. And they equate Tommy Tuberville and Robert E. Lee is almost the same level of human being. He's fighting for the South because he did it with sports, but now he's doing it as a politician. But he's basically, there we go.
He's
those
a
elements.
threat to our national security. He's not doing a damn thing
Nope.
except making us
But
unsafe.
he wants his name linked with the military, with generals. He's as important as they are. He's the gateway by which our soldiers are trained. He is now in his mind, the coach of the U.S. fucking military. And
in his mind, but that's
right.
not his lasting legacy. And now
I
that's
agree.
not how people are going to talk about him.
I'm talking about his
And
motivation, his behavior.
awareness. Yeah, well, there's your motivation and there's your behavior, but then there's the aftermath and there's the result and your behavior. He's not behaving in a vacuum. You know,
Right.
he's not sitting in his basement doing a podcast telling people what to do. He's sitting in our real Senate up,
Mhm.
you know, and his obstruction
Having real impacts. Right.
has real impact, and his obstruction and his narcissism and his toxicity puts our existence at risk. He wants to be tied to the military. Congratulations, Tuberville. Your name is now forever tied to the military as a threat to it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Right along
Thank
with Benedict
you so
Arnold.
fucking much.
And yeah.
Donald Trump calling our military losers and suckers after
Right.
getting 5 Vietnam deferments because his foot hurt. Bullshit. Not wanting a veteran who lost a limb and was burned singing at the White House because it would make him look bad. Shame on anybody who still supports Donald Trump after John Kelly confirmed that. Also, shame on John Kelly for sitting on that story for as long as he did. We
Right.
need to know the truth about the people who are sitting in positions of power that affect our livelihoods. And not enough people make demands of those people.
Yeah, especially
they
if
are
it's
in the cult.
If it's that fucking extreme. It'd be one thing.
It's glaring.
Yeah, it'd be one thing if it was like in these meetings he dozed off, or he picks his nose when we're eating and he has no table manners, or he's like Lyndon Johnson. Okay, so Lyndon Johnson, who lived up to the name Johnson, if you believe the mythology.
I'm well aware. Bryan Cranston did an excellent job recreating.
Oh yeah. So there was a classic point where a reporter was following Lyndon Johnson. He was going to the bathroom, and he asked him a question about what our strategy in Vietnam is, or something, and he was like, "You want to see our strategy in Vietnam?" And he just turns around with his dick hanging out and shows him his dick. That like, on the one hand, or both hands, I don't know how. I mean, apparently, if myth stands up, back. The idea, that's a true story. I'm screwing up some of the minor details, but that is a true story. He showed it to his dick to a reporter. That, for example, in this day and age, would be a scandal for ages, right? But at the same time,
it depends on who was showing their dick, I guess.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, who cared?
Donald Trump said he has a better body than Joe Biden, so we're just taking everybody at their word now. So.
Can you imagine dunking on an 80-year-old, saying you're in better shape as an 80-year-old as a 76-year-old? For fuck's sake, man.
We have the receipts that shows that you're not.
No, not even close to true.
Not even close. Take a spin class and a Pilates class and then get back to me.
Yeah, but the
golf cart.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hold on. I'm going to let me transition over to this real quick so we can go back. But for this particular story, but the idea being that that doing that to a reporter is shocking and awful, and on an interpersonal level, very gross and a no-no in terms of it's an HR nightmare in any business in the world, and certainly shouldn't be something a president should be doing. That said, most of us would think that story is sort of an adorable anecdote compared to standing in Arlington Cemetery saying what's in it for them, or not wanting to be seen on stage with a wounded veteran because it grosses you out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What it does
there is a huge fucking difference in that world. Right.
And it's Donald Trump's toxic narcissism, because standing next to a real hero who really served, who's really brave, makes him feel like shit.
Crazy.
But he doesn't know how to identify those feelings because he's never had a therapist. So, there's no self-awareness. And,
I've never had a therapist, and I do. And I gotta say, like, at a certain point, I understand some inrooted, like, personality traits. This idea that give me the 7-year-old and I'll show you the man, and that idea that everybody's themselves until that point is fucking bullshit because people change and grow all the time. Your brain is still plastic till you're 22. Like this idea that it's all locked in after a certain point, and if there's, if mommy or daddy didn't love you past a certain point, that's like making the argument that if anybody finds an adoptive child from an abused home that you get at 8 years old, you should just fucking throw them in an incinerator is fucking dumb. Honestly,
People can
like
change.
what do you, they absolutely can, and I gotta tell you, if you're past 30 and you blame your parents for anything, grow the fuck up. If you're past 50, you're a narcissistic asshole because you think your problems are rooted in everybody else, if you even believe that. If other people are making excuses for how you behave in your fucking 70s based on what your parents were like, and especially if you didn't grow up in poverty and ice skate uphill your entire fucking life and have to pay your way through school and all kinds of stuff that normal people have to do if their parents are assholes and leave them on their own or run away or whatever. The idea that this guy grew up in a fucking cush environment his whole fucking life. I'm sorry. I'm not going to excuse somebody because of affluenza. I'm not going to say that it's, his parents treated him like shit and it became malignant because poor Donald Trump grew up rich. Get the fuck out of here. No, you're an adult. You're responsible unless you have something directly wrong with your brain chemistry that can be fixed by a modification of your brain chemistry. I don't want to fucking hear it because everything else is attitude. Everything else is like you are introduced to new facts and information. You're choosing not to participate in them because you're a fucking asshole. That's why.
And we are living in the result of Donald Trump revenge fucking the world.
Yeah.
Walking around with the giant chips on his shoulder and he didn't put them there. It's what the world did to him.
Why?
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's horrible.
Because why? Because he wasn't rich enough? Because he didn't get enough of a fucking head start?
Didn't love him. I mean, my father was a fucking asshole too. Imagine Donald Trump driving a truck in Jersey in the 70s and 80s. There's my dad. You know what I did? Once I realized I was old enough and I realized how terrible my father was, I cut off ties with my father. I haven't spoken to my father in 20 years. And I'm entitled to that because once you become an adult and you realize how toxic a relationship is to you, regardless of what that relationship is, you're entitled to break ties and move forward as yourself, standing alone as your own person. Donald Trump can't do that. Everything else, and that's why he's like, this is a witch hunt. It's what everyone's doing to me. It doesn't matter that he has a circle of accomplices and all of that. It's always about him. And there will be cult members to the last. They will take the Kool-Aid when he does. They will be there until he takes his last breath, when he falls over dead in a courtroom, because he's not going to be Speaker of the House. He's not going to be president. He is going to be waiting to sit in court or sit in court for the rest of his miserable existence. Yep. And I still would love for the mainstream media to stop giving him any power. He doesn't hold office. I don't care if he supports Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan should not be Speaker of the House when he speaks like fucking Spider from Goodfellas. He's like, I thought you said I was all right, Spider. Blah, 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 blah. And let's not forget that Jim Jordan is an accomplice to rape.
Yeah.
And also has been ducking a congressional subpoena for like 2 years and is an accomplice to treason. Like, stop normalizing all of this behavior. Stop saying this is what Jim Jordan said.
Stop acting like there are only 10 Republicans in the fucking House of Representatives. That's the weird part. Like,
where's everybody else?
Right. Where are, you want to talk like Democrats at a certain point, every time we turn around, there's another Democrat where we're like, ooh, I like her. I like him. Oh, he's good.
Hey, Jasmine Crockett, where you been?
Exactly. Dan Goldman.
I love Dan.
So
proud. So proud to be a Democrat, like more than ever.
Yeah.
But what we need now is everyone. It's huge, but we need more Jasmine Crockett's and we need more Hakeem Jeffries.
Well, we do have more. That's the great thing.
And more Eric Swalwells and more Gavin Newsoms. Let's go.
But there are. That's what I'm saying.
Louder.
You're aware of more names, I think, probably of Democrats than you are of Republicans. And it's not because there aren't loud Republicans. It's because there's only like 6 or 8 of them that eat. Like, remember when Comer kind of came out of nowhere because of this? Like, he was put in charge of this oversight committee when they got this position. And so he's going to lead this charge for 2 reasons. One, because they know it's not going anywhere, and they can sacrifice him. They don't fucking care. They know he's willing, and he was willing to ride this out. They couldn't do it with Byron Donalds because he's one of the few black guys that they have, and they can like hold him up and go, look, we've got he agrees with me, which by the way is not diversity. Diversity is not finding someone of a different color that agrees with everything you say. I'm just saying that's not how diversity
There's another
works.
word
That's
for
not
that,
the fucking point,
not.
right? It's not even the fucking point of diversity, but that's why they wouldn't put Byron Donalds in charge of it, because they could, because Comer's a fucking throwaway, and Jim Jordan, like they figure he's relatively safe, but if he gets bounced, that also saves them the whole OSU thing as it continues to come to light. I think Gates.
Let's go, Clooney. Where's that docudrama? Let's go, Clooney.
Right? I think
up.
Yeah, I think Gates. Quite frankly, I think Gates's ethics panel, issues, the ethics committee issues that he had, was the primary reason why he went after McCarthy, because he wanted
absolutely.
This is his one. He used the CR as an excuse, but he did it specifically because he knew the votes didn't exist to keep McCarthy in there, because they never did. After that, everybody was been ginning for their moment to show their their fucking wad, have their mini Johnson moment. And so he just went, fuck it, I'm gonna like, this will delay that process. Anything that delays that process. And then when you got, I mean, that's fucking gnarly. When you have a situation where a politician like Menendez or somebody else like that could like scuttle the investigation into them by not voting to fund the government, and that they singularly have that power or the ability to do that, like Tuberville does with the military in some ways, or Gates does by throwing McCarthy under the bus. That's where you need a new rule, kids. That's when the next time you have a relatively bipartisan balance in a committee someplace, and Democrats will have to run it for that to happen, because the people appointed to those committees will be working with them, and you'll get a majority, if not a unanimous consent to send something through a committee. A 60-40 majority will do it. You're going to have a rule that says, hey, anybody under an ethics investigation cannot, bring, top tier changes to the floor like this. They cannot
do
a
we talked
silent
about
hold.
this last week.
Right.
Yeah, we talked about this last Monday. If you're a sitting member of Congress being investigated by a congressional committee, I think that you get put on leave. Right. I think you don't even come to work.
Agreed.
They can decide if it's paid leave or it's modified paid leave or whatever it is, but you don't get to come onto the House floor. And I think you don't get to bop around to different microphones like you're at, Ozfest or whatever. You don't get to do that. You don't get to crash.
No. And thank you for being with me this morning, Tara Dublin. Don't forget, Tara Dublin Rocks
on my book
on
real
Shitter.
Quick before you bring in Bob.
Yes, we put it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we put it in the chat a bunch of times.
Bob. I love Bob. And between you and Bob, hi Bob, between you and Bob last week having me on, I have now sold 180 books. 180.
Yay. Yeah. Look at that.
But I need to sell like so many more, especially since Marjorie has a crap book coming out that Don Jr. is backing. So we need to get the word out about my book, The Sound of Settling a Rock.
We need our own Heritage Foundation that could just buy up a bunch of them and pulp them. Just, get them.
Can the DNC buy my book like the RNC buys Republican books? Can we arrange for that to happen? Because if we got that going, then I would be on the bestseller list and I would never have to struggle ever again. So my book, it's a rock and roll love story. The link is on my Twitter at Tara Dublin Rocks. And the reviews are really great. Like, it's not even just my mom. Like, other people are reading my book and they really love it. And I got, people I don't even know are like, I couldn't put it down.
There we go.
What I needed to seriously go super viral. So production company would be like, that would be a great streaming series. What an excellent property we could make money from. And then you can be in it, Hal, like we talked about last week. When we had you in it, and Mark Hamill and Ellen Barkin and Lisa Ann Walter, they all want to be in it.
Like it.
So let's go. Let's make magic happen.
It's going to happen. Thank you so much.
Hal. Thanks everybody in the chat.
Absolutely. Much love. We'll see you again next time. And give me 1 second. Yes.
And I'm going to work on that do not disturb thing. I promise.
I'll work on it with you. We'll talk after the show.
All right, everybody. Have a great day. I love you.
Okay, there you go. And ladies and gentlemen, there she goes. And give me 1 second so I can bring in the lovely and talented Bob Cesca. It just takes a momentary switcheroony of the guess. I had to put this in here, and then I do a copy and I do a paste, and then it's that simple. And then as soon as it loads, I transition them over. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bob Cesca. Look at this. How are you?
Hey, all right.
There
How are
is.
you? Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah,
Is this
spectacular.
working?
You sound fantastic. Is this
Okay,
on?
great.
Is this on? So, hold on. I've got to shrink you down. You're a whole lot of hero, so you're taking up a lot
I'm
of.
probably a little bit taller than Tara.
You are a wee
Yeah,
bit. You're also closer to camera, so you're bigger in two ways: reality and perspective. So we will
right.
we'll deal with that as coming along. I mean, right out of the gate. Hey, thanks for coming on. And needless to say, when we planned you coming on today, I think either one of us necessarily thought that Hamas would have attacked Israel in this extreme way. Your take on it, your thoughts on it, kind of right out of the gate.
God, it's such a complicated issue that sometimes I got to be perfectly honest. Sometimes I just tune it out. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
it's impossible to tune it out right now. It would
Yeah.
be inhuman to tune it out right now. But it's one of those issues that I feel like no matter where you come down, there's something wrong with that take. And
Yeah.
so I honestly kind
Oh,
of
I did my
avoid it.
best. I did my best to do that this morning right out of the gate. The chat room will
Yeah.
attest that they weren't going to like a lot of what I had to say. I thought the most, and again, I personally believe that in a situation you have no direct control over and that has happened in front of you, the only value it can truly have is reflective. Is you go, myself in the same situation, what would I do? Am I in the same situation anywhere else in my belief system about something? And I specifically talking about Hamas bragging that they rope-a-doped the Israelis and made them think that they were interested in peace, and then basically used it to sneak up on them, which, that coupled with what they did in the in that music festival, they shot what at current count it's like 230 people and kidnapped a bunch of other people and are holding them. God knows what's happened to those people, if they'll be returned alive at all, but much less what's happening to them right now, because they seem to be really selective about the women that they took.
Right.
In a very scary way.
It's such a horror show. And when I see this particular story and similar stories, when I look at what's happening in Ukraine all this time, I hate to make it about us, Hal. I hate to turn something
but you
this
have
tragic that's happening elsewhere about us. But there's a lesson here that I'm kind of shocked we haven't learned as a country yet, which is there's a lot of like war gaming out there for a civil war in the United States. In fact, there are mega churches all throughout Trump country right now indoctrinating their congregations in order to prepare them for this civil war, this pro-Trump civil war. They see him as this flawed messiah who will guide them to
the return of David.
Yeah, exactly right. And when you look at images and video coming out of Ukraine, looks a whole lot like the United States. It's and I'll come back to Israel in a second, but when you see the war footage from Ukraine, it's different than a lot of the war footage we've seen in the last, for example, 20 years, which has been desert warfare or desolate areas that are already war-torn and falling apart. When you look at Ukraine, oh my God, it looks like any American city. It looks like any American suburb. And I thought for a while there that those images would disabuse us of this fascination with going to war against ourselves, sectarian violence inside the United States. Sadly, that hasn't really happened. It's only gotten worse since Ukraine. And then you apply.
I think it's gotten sharper. So you know me, man. I watch an inordinate amount of right-wing media shit. And a lot of times I'm one of the few guys that goes over to BitChute, which is like the ass end Craigslist dark alley of the worst, most racist, ridiculous, anti-science, like bigoted bullshit you'll see on YouTube. That's all of BitChute, right? Yeah. And it was before Rumble existed. It was the only fallback for a lot of these like hyper right wingers. And the reality is that while absolutely you and I think we worry that the big talk seems to have blown up even in spite of the Ukraine war. The
Yeah.
reality is you guys have fun with that part of it has grown immensely. Because there used to be a time when like Glenn Beck, for example, would like lean into his mic, go, "This is so wrong," and blah blah blah. And now he's sitting back in his chair with this kind of resolved, like, I think we just have to go. We have to fight. We've got to
Yeah.
fight. Someone's got to fight. And it's abundantly clear to his listeners, he ain't talking about him, folks. He means you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I felt the same way about Greg Gutfeld last week with that
Yeah.
rant that he did on the Five. I said, oh my God, yeah, let's have Private Bullet Blocker on the front lines if he wants this so bad. Let's have
Yeah.
him take the lead in some assault, some urban assault
Yeah.
against some allegedly woke area. Because, by the way, woke, that's going to be the definition of the enemy. That's going to be
Yeah.
anyone they consider to be woke. Doesn't matter if they're a Republican or a conservative, whatever. As
Oh,
long as they're seen and defined as being woke, that's the enemy in that particular civil war. So, yeah, I'd love to see Greg Gutfeld pick up an
fuck.
AR-15.
Yeah. I mean, dude,
and
the dude
be
can't
on the
even sit up.
skirmish line or something.
The
Yeah.
dude can't even sit up in his fucking chair on his own goddamn show.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, every joke that he reads comes off of a piece of paper that his writer's room hands him. So
well,
it's very obvious.
I don't know that. I'm curious about that. I would like to see the writer's room, because if he has a writer's room, they hate him. And
Yeah,
if he
yeah.
and most of the time, I think it's like notes he thinks are too cute by half that he writes down that he thinks will be funny, and he runs them by Jesse Waters, which is a fucking mistake because Nosferatu doesn't have a sense of humor. And then he reads them back, and the only person that he believes might be sympathetic and think they're funny, he's already read them to, and they weren't funny then. So they all just, it's fucking, I mean, maybe as a comedian, I just have a different perspective on what's going on there, but it just reeks. That said, most of these guys seem resolved to the fact that the Republican chaos in the House, specifically that Matt Gaetz, took the bait and ran with this, and that I was going to show this to Tara on, earlier in the show, but there's an article on, let's see, it was like, where was it? It's from, basically talking about how the Cole, is it Tom Cole, the guy who was like standing up talking on the floor, for McCarthy when he lost or whatever, basically just said the deal that, that the far right worked out with the leadership is dead. The next speaker is not going to have those rules. They're not going to have the fucking one vote vacate rule. They're not going to have to bring all this shit to the floor, largely because McCarthy already did. They're just never going to get through the Senate, and they're never going to get signed by the president. So it's a fucking waste of time anyways. And this idea of, that there's going to be 12 appropriations bills by fucking December 1st or something is just embarrassingly stupid. So he's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. I don't know. If we need 27 Republicans sided with Democrats against the agriculture bill because they were trying to sneak a bunch of shit into it, and it didn't pass. That's fairly standard. None of them are going to pass without a majority of Democrats joining a minority of Republicans at this point.
Yeah.
And whatever speaker knows this. And their only recipe is chaos at this point. And then they have to admit, we never wanted to run government in the first place. We want to destroy it because we don't work for the American people. We work for our handlers or Putin or Trump or some ideological idea that there should be a gutless king leader that we all follow instead of a president, because the rabble doesn't believe it. And that's the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats believe in democracy. Republicans believe we're specifically a republic. You can argue that these are the biggest fight in the United States come down to the popular vote versus the electoral college. That is effectively what you're talking about. And the Republicans are only for the electoral college thing because they have a fucking head start. They got two senators in a bunch of states that have 900,000 people in them.
That's right.
People, listen to me. Dude, I'm getting very excited.
Yeah. It's a mess, and I think that's the point. The chaos is the point. Chaos is the new cocaine for the House Republicans, and what they're doing is they're undermining confidence.
They also have regular cocaine as well. I like to point out.
Yes, both.
They haven't dropped the old cocaine.
The new cocaine.
Yeah, it's cocaine plus. Yeah, it's like a lemon with your
cocaine,
water.
Chaos.
Right.
Yeah, they're mixing their cocaine and chaos. Who put their chaos in my
Bad
cocaine?
mix.
Exactly. And so that's the idea. The idea is to further undermine the integrity and functioning of the government, according, in the perspective of their own people, to make these areas that already think government is a shit show look even more like a shit show.
Right.
Even if it's their own people, because again, we're talking about an information silo where it doesn't really matter who's responsible for the chaos and incompetence. They can frame it through RSBN and Newsmax and Fox News and the entire AM radio dial that, oh, this is the Democrats doing this somehow. Like everything can be twisted back around, even though it is Matt Gaetz, even though it is the Rodeo Clown Caucus in the House. They will tell through their propaganda outlets, they will relate the idea that it's not those guys. Those guys are just reacting against the radical left Dems. Those guys are just reacting against wokeism. They're deliberately trying to slow the progress of government, slow the spending of government, slow the influence of government. That's what that's all about. Right. So it's amazing how they're able to spin just absolute mayhem and kind of make it work. And that's
well, how do you I've said this before, like, that whole statement everybody loves to throw around right now, which is, if somebody tells you who they are, listen to them, or whatever, the idea that believe them. Okay. And yet, since the fucking 80s, since Reagan, the 11 most frightening words are, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you, and we need a government so small you can drown it in a bathtub, all that kind of stuff. At what point are we hiring Ted Bundy to babysit? There's a, know what I mean? At some point, you have to recognize that the GOP specifically is not interested in representative government. And again, that goes to the sort of electoral college idea that they would rather go back to, and they even talk about it now, landowners only being allowed to vote. They're looking at shit. They're reading stuff that was thrown out during the creation of the Constitution, during the Federalist, in the Federalist Papers, specifically like, why not? Well, because it's terrible, that's why. Because the founding fathers, who you've been, blathering about supporting for all this fucking time, decided in their wisdom that that would be a terrible thing. And they were right to do so.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
Right.
There's this cognitive dissonance between being patriotic Americans, which you see as part of Republican branding almost. I mean, that's really the way. The great irony is that Donald Trump, flying in the face of supporting the troops with all these remarks to John Kelly and so on, and suckers and losers. The great irony of that is how Republicans have always talked about patriotism as being a Republican brand, the American flag as part of the Republican brand. It was never more so than in the days after 9/11, if you remember. Right. And the cognitive dissonance is a lot of that sort of rah-rah, apple pie, Chevrolet kind of nonsense coming from the Republicans all the time. And of course, the reverence for the founding fathers is completely opposite in terms of the push towards authoritarianism, which of course is contrary
everything
to
they
the
thought
idea
about
of checks and balances and a three-branch government and so on. It was immense fairness that was established in the United States Constitution. Right. And so that runs directly in conflict with this drive toward having Donald Trump finish the musical chairs game as being the last guy in the chair. And then that's it. No one else gets to be president. I mean, that's the contradiction that we see, one of many.
Never mind #family values. For fuck's sake, you and I both, when we were growing up, all we heard about was that they were the family values fucking party. And nothing about Dennis Hastert or Newt Gingrich or fucking Donald Trump, has somehow, like, they're not even using that phrase anymore, because I don't think they fucking can, because almost every one of their leaders has been married 3 times. I think that's the magic. That's the secret sauce. If you want to be president on the Republican side at this point, you got to have at least 3 wives. Talk about, Pastor Jeffries or whatever. But like, you only get your own planet if you have 3 wives. There's an element of, like, for fuck's sake, Newt Gingrich, famous, we remember the story, like, basically serving divorce papers to his wife while she was recovering from cancer surgery. And yet that asshole could walk around for a decade after that, lecturing people on family values, thinking that, by the way, the Clintons, who stayed fucking together, who got through it, he had an adulterous affair, he admitted to it, it was super embarrassing, and pantsed in front of the whole fucking world, almost literally. and they worked it out. And meanwhile, this motherfucker just, is dumping one for a newer model. And you got to at some point go, all right, feature, not a bug. These guys they definitely look at Melania and go, I want one of those. Even the religious people that support him, the guys on fucking like Flashpoint, on the the religious shows that he occasionally goes on, they're all like Melania, right? And you could tell that just means it was all bullshit. It was all always bullshit. And in that point, was it always a rope-a-dope? Because I think there's some. I think keeping families together, except in situations of abuse and genuine, irreconcilable differences, is a good goal for most people. That seems reasonable. You know what I mean? Especially not letting the families fall apart for economic reasons. Most families fight over money. So Democrats have done more to keep families together in the last 5 decades than Republicans ever have. So I just find it fascinating that just it all goes back to risky business. What was this? All this fuck it, make your move, or was that all bullshit? That was all bullshit, Joel. That is that where we find ourselves, and more likely do Republicans know this? Like it feels like they do.
Yeah. You know what? The Republicans have one, I don't know if you call this an advantage, but they have this ability to be able to recognize the way things are as opposed to the way things they'd like them to be. And that tends to be, I guess, less of a feature of republicanism, but more of a feature of conservatism, where they understand the flaws of humanity and they're not necessarily trying to change people. Obviously there's a significant amount of influence there, but one of the things I'm talking about here is Republicans understand that Americans have very, very short attention spans and even shorter term memories. And they understand that Americans forget things very easily, events from even a couple of years ago. Hence Donald Trump at whatever 45% in the polls right now. Oh, that guy, what was it? When was that guy a president? I don't remember. He was was he president a few years ago? I don't remember. Was that a disaster in that last year, especially? I don't know.
Right.
And so Republicans see that and they recognize that. They recognize that Americans will typically come back to the same place that they started in a couple of years earlier, forgetting what that experience was like. And so I think that tends to work to their advantage in a very, very cynical way. And I think part of our job, and this is a weird thing because it really doesn't have much to do with policy making or trying to make a compelling argument for valid policy making. And that is, I feel like all of us, not just those of us who have podcasts and so on, but all of us are in this constant triaging of the American memory. Like, do you not remember that the longest serving Republican Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, was, a child
convicted
rapist?
And reneged on the extortion that one of his victims put him through to maintain his seat and he was the longest serving Republican. That's one of the other aspects of that. Look at fucking what was the Foley, the guy in Florida who was on the Missing and Exploited Children's committee, and he was like sexting 11-year-old page boys at the remember the overhaul of the page system and how you could contact them and through what anybody under the age of 18 changed because of Mark Foley. For fuck's sake, like, god damn. So
I guess it's like what, 3 if Jim Jordan becomes the next Speaker of the House. Let's just assume that that's going to happen. 3 of the last 5 Republican speakers of the House will have some form of sex scandal, underlying their
violent sex scandal. We're not even talking about like somebody who was like cheating on their wife or their partner of any sort. We're talking about engaged in the active or the cover up of sexual violence. Fucking hell. I think Scalise has a higher chance of getting it because of the sympathy vote that he'll get because he was shot. I also think he'll play, a little more mid-zone because I think he wants his career to last longer. Jim Jordan is already, he's any future he has, he's never going to be senator of Ohio because of the OSU thing, and he's certainly never going to be fucking president. So his power candle burns here. That's as
Yeah,
far
yeah.
as it goes. And the only thing he can hope to do is probably pull a Paul Ryan, which is set aside some sort of special tax breaks or something for an industry and then go back to Ohio and benefit from them.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he's like a cartoon character, Jim Jordan. I don't think even members of the Republican caucus take him seriously enough for that post. He's
Right.
got that Q score that people recognize who he is,
Yep.
and that's important. But I think even the most radical Republicans will want someone who has some knowledge of parliamentary procedure, who knows how to maybe keep this insane caucus of Republicans together. And I think you're exactly right. I think Steve Scalise is going to end up being the guy, even though Jim Jordan has that sort of Fox News fame backing him up, right?
But
Jim Jordan is a lot like Gary Oldman's character in The Contender. He's that kind of Republican where it's all about the fire and brimstone. Look at me. Don't get in the way of Jim. Don't be the guy standing between Jim Jordan and a TV camera,
right?
Because you'll get run over. And
right.
That's the kind of guy Jim Jordan is.
But he also has a glass ceiling on his political career because of the OSU thing, because it will not let go. And you talk about like the short attention span that Americans have or whatever, and I would say worldwide that's true. But I think there are now 2 lanes of memory that have been fostered in the American psyche due to Comic-Cons and horror cons and the cons of those kind of things, and binge watching shows, is that the amount of people who can pull fucking detail from Game of Thrones is equal to the memory and detail allocation that you would see back when people had read The Lord of the Rings all the way through. When I was a kid, which I did. So
me too.
But the important thing is that there is social media on the one hand has been able to help Trump and his ilk use an old tactic, which is flood the scene with bullshit. If you have a scandal coming, have 3 scandals. Fuck it. Just make it like, and then claim I only have 5 scandals right now, 7 scandals right now because they're coming after me. They're just throwing shit at me. That's, and instead of, oh shit, if you got 3, then just add the rest, and literally people will be overwhelmed with how to even deal with it psychologically. But there's a downside to that. That used to work when they controlled the press, when he could call people up and be John Barron, or he could get somebody on Page 6 or the Inquirer to bullshit their way through an article for him.
Yeah.
Social media itself, as much as Elon Musk is trying to hand Trump and his ilk the reins of the American psyche, is not working. There's too many sources. There's too many. And you and I and our ilk and Tara, when she's posting as well, even when they try to respond negatively to what we're saying, still they're seeing what we're saying, and that didn't used to be the case, and so I find maybe that's the root of their frustration, because Trump was not happy those days he was in court. As much as he wanted to pretend he was there to win and that this was all bullshit, he was in a fucking panic every time he left the courtroom. Walking in, there was an element of talk about short attention span, a little bit of bravado, because he'd had 3 hours of sleep and a big blazed rail of Adderall and Sudafed, and right,
of course,
blap,
breakfast of
Junior,
champions
stop,
for Trump,
stop bogarting, Junior, and then and then he would go in there with this like, this is all bullshit, this judge is, and then he would come out and going, I did nothing wrong, and he's like fucking wild-eyed, like it was, you could tell it was rough and scary, and he's like, if my lawyers are this fucking stupid to take me on as a client, that's what he believes. If they can't lie their way out of this, because that's what lawyers do to him, Roy Cohn in particular, he's the standard. It doesn't have to be true. The lawyers just have to make it true. If they can't do that about this, which he thinks is a slam dunk, he thought he had an easy out because Tom Fitton told him he did. Imagine how fucked he is in the documents case. He's going to fucking jail. This is the first time I'm like comfortable saying that the documents case is going to end in jail time.
Yeah, I don't see how it couldn't. I mean, you've got the whole element of a very obvious cover-up going on with Tavares and De Oliveira trying to delete the security cam footage and all the rest. I mean, that to me, when that news came down of that particular angle on the story, that's when I determined, oh yes, he's going to get convicted of this crime. And whatever form the prison term takes doesn't even matter at this point, that he's going to be convicted and he's going to be sentenced to
Yep.
something, and that
Yeah.
will be immensely satisfying.
Yes, it will.
I have a question for you though.
Sure.
Do you think Elena Haba told him that there wasn't a box to check as far as a jury trial in the New York case? Do you think that his representation actually lied to him about that document and the jury trial, or is he just lying publicly and saying, "Oh, there was no box"? I'm going to assume that it's a little bit of both.
I think Haba maybe avoided the conversation with him because if you're a woman around Donald Trump, you're good at avoiding him getting you in a corner and talking to you for very long for your own safety. That said, I think he picked it up from a couple of other dipshits on Fox News who he talks to, including Sean Hannity, who say that, in most of these cases, you don't get it. You might have gotten it for one little area, but the rest of it, you're going to have a judge. This is going to be a bench trial for most of these things because that's how it's done. And so he convinced himself that that was true for it across the board. And that if there was a box to be checked, it was because it was for part of the stuff they threw out. She probably, if anything, she bullshitted him by saying, I checked the box on no jury trial, but that didn't for the stuff that ended up getting thrown out because it was all a waste of time. We were saying we don't believe there should be a trial at all. And he went, Durr, okay. And then the rest of it was, he believed that the 20% they're going after him for, which is, by the way, the worst shit. You know what I mean? It's like if you murder somebody, steal a car, and go on a car chase across town, and they don't bother to charge you with speeding. Technically, they're only going after you for 2/3 of the charges, the murder and the assault, right? And that's what that seems lost on him. But I think it was the Fox people and maybe Tom Fitton or whatever that talked him into it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And you know what? There's another question I've been meaning to ask you for a long time now, and it is this.
Yes,
you brought it up as far
real.
as
yes, it's real. It's attached. Whatever.
Very nicely done, by the way.
Thank you.
As someone who's desperately trying to preserve whatever hair is left on this head,
dude, if you can keep most of it for the next 5 years, there's going to be a pill that just solves all of it. It's stupid.
Okay,
There's an article there was an article in Popular Mechanics last week about how they've figured out basically the cure for gray hair and that they're working on it right now. It's going to be and it's about like reinvigorating the melanin in the initial cells of your hair follicles, which they're going to regrow anyways, and it's going to be like once every 3 years, a stem cell treatment, and then foof, and everybody's going to look like a fucking Viking. It's like it's a little silly. You'll even get to pick what kind of hair you want. Check this out. And thanks to CRISPR-Cas9 and a bunch of other shit, in about 15 years, you'll be able to pick the kind of hair you want. You want long, straight hair? You want hyper curly hair? You want natural? Whatever it is, you can have that hair. Like, it's going to be silly.
I've reached that age, Hal.
Oh,
I've reached that age now where my haircut, the style of haircut that I get, is entirely determined by how much hair I've got left, and so I've got to kind of dance around that issue.
But I will say that by like size and stature, you could rock a bald head and everybody would just go, "Motherfucker, that guy's tough as shit." You could,
you could. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if I want to see what that looks like.
Right. Well, that's always a fear point. But then as soon as people do it, they stick to it.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Denzel, man. He's done 3 movies. Bald now. He looks fucking fantastic. I'm just saying, it won't matter. It won't matter in a few years. I'm telling you, because it will. Like there was a great Patrick Stewart when they were asking him about him being a bald captain of the Enterprise, and somebody asked him. He goes, in the future, they haven't cured baldness. And he goes, in the future, they don't care. And I was like, I fucking love this man.
That's great. I love that so much. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, well, speaking of hair issues, Donald Trump, you were mentioning Game of Thrones a second ago, and it got me to thinking about something that I've observed. And I come from the perspective of having watched all of these shows, the golden age of television that we're in right now. You can go back to starting that golden age with shows like The Sopranos, where we followed this criminal anti-hero and we empathized with this criminal anti-hero. And there have been many, many subsequent shows over the last 2 decades that have strongly featured empathetic anti-hero characters who in many cases are sociopaths and murderers and crooks and criminals and terrible people. I mean, the fact that every once in a while I would step back and The Sopranos being just the go-to kind of example, where I would step back and go, Tony Soprano's a real dickhead. I mean, what an
Yeah.
awful person.
He
He's a murderer, he's a sociopath,
right.
doesn't care about anything. And I would just stop and go, wow, should I really be rooting for this guy? Well, I guess I do. And it's the same with like characters like Kendall Roy from Succession and so on. Do I
Or Breaking
really
Bad.
yeah, exactly. Breaking Bad's another great example. And so my question is, has that dominance of empathetic anti-heroes
Mhm.
led to a significant portion of the American public kind of looking at someone like Donald Trump and going, he's okay.
Let me
You know
let
what I
me
mean? It's
yeah,
because Donald Trump is this guy who's, and I could go through the list of thousands and thousands of things as in terms of
mhm.
why he's a bad villain, why he's an evildoer, to use George W. Bush's terminology. Um, and and yet he's got this support. And I think of it also in terms of people we know who are friends or family members who maybe in some way raised us to have good character and good values and things like that as best they knew, who now support this guy who's got no character and very
Right.
few values other than self-preservation and ego. um and they're like, well, this is a great guy, this guy can be president. And I'm going, well, what's caused
Where'd
that
they get
glitch?
that? Well,
What's
yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly,
I
where
let
does
me
that
let
come
me
from?
starting with The Godfather in the late 70s, early 80s.
Mhm.
America has been in the throes of what I would call empathy rape from a certain sector of the writing community.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that and this, there's a lot of threads to it. One of them is the over psychoanalyzing of everything, because psychoanalysis became a big in New York and Los Angeles, navel gazing at both ways, and everything from shadow work to meditation to Jungian psychology and all that kind of stuff. And this idea that you understanding your bad and blah blah blah, and the idea that you should write what you know. Well, most people know that they're a good person, but they have bad thoughts and bad things. So they extrapolate that onto another person. And one of the things that kept showing up in my experience as an actor is this. I see this myth happen with actors talking about villains that they play. That villains, you have to find what the person loves about themselves, and you got to find out why this person believes in what they're doing. Bullshit. A good
Mhm.
portion of evil doing people, the evildoers, know they are doing something wrong. They get pleasure from it. It isn't from an ethical standpoint or a belief that they're right. It just turns them on, and they don't
Yeah.
care enough about the other person. It is a person devoid of some of those capabilities, and shutting off those parts of yourself to create that character makes a more realistic version of it than making them just kind of accidentally fucking charming. So again, this goes to Hannibal Lecter and everybody being fixated on Hannibal Lecter and the fucking show. And it's no surprise that the guy who did the Hannibal series, which I took a giant shit on Twitter because of the people who were like sucking up and going, "Oh, I love Hannibal. He's so Hannibal." Okay, first of all, in the first movie, in Silence of the Lambs, when they're discuss, well, it's technically the second because Manhunter was the first one.
Yeah.
William Peterson in that
Mhm.
role, and the remake of it was, but the original was very good.
Yeah.
And when Clarice Starling is meeting with him, when Chilton is walking her down, and he's reminding her, "Don't get near the glass. Be careful. Remember what he is. That he's a monster. All that kind of stuff." He
Mhm.
shows her a picture of a nurse who worked at the hospital, where at one point he was taken to the infirmary. He faked a heart attack, and when she leaned over to loosen his straps, he bit her face, broke her jaw, and swallowed her tongue. And she lost one of her eyeballs in the attack. He
And
literally
his heart rate
pulled
never
on
got
her
over 79. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and his heart rate, yeah. And I'm like, that's who he is. Everything else
Mhm.
is a fucking veneer so he can get close to you, so he can swallow your fucking tongue and bite your eyeball out. Stop it. Fucking stop it. I understand that sharks are beautiful creatures. I understand that sharks should be protected from overfishing, but sharks don't have options. Sharks have a singular brain and they do one thing. Humans are not. And if this guy has found pleasure in the harming of other people, you can write it off as psychosis all you want to, but he's getting his needs met that way. And that's what happened in, I think, Breaking Bad showed it the best, which was a guy
Mhm.
who they gave an innocent enough reason in the beginning, which, by the way, if you can cook up a fantastic version of meth and sell it or whatever, you can't drum up a cheaper way of doing insulin or something. You're a genius professor that can think up perfect chemistry, but you can't fucking There's 90 other ways to make a huge living in chemistry. You choose the one that kills kids and
That's
has
right.
people die in the fucking front seat of their car while their kid is baking in the hot sun in the back seat. Fuck off. But anyways, the idea that he has cancer and he wants to leave make some quick money and leave it to his family works for the first half of that series, almost as a movie.
Mhm.
But after that point, he's a fucking monster.
Yes.
He's always been, and you know when he becomes a monster, it isn't even in season 2 and season 3, and when he wearing the fucking hat and being a tough guy or whatever. It's when he lets the other dudes, lets the girl die.
Lets Jane die. Watches her die.
Watches her die.
Drown in her own vomit. Yeah.
Yeah. This is not the point. This is not, I don't know what to do, I'm scared. He made a distinct choice to let her die.
Yeah.
And from that point on, for me, morally, the movie became his brother-in-law's story. He's the hero of Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And from that point on, I have one of those things where, like, if I'm watching a show like that, I can't forgive past a certain point. And if they reach this certain point, I can understand the struggle. Taxi Driver is a great example of a anti-hero who brings it home. You know, because he was headed towards being a rogue assassin. He was shaved his head. The gun was there. He was going to kill the senator because he was drawing attention away from the girl that he liked, and she worked for him. And he was headed down that road. And then there was a spark of goodness in this dude that wouldn't blow out, whatever it was, that made him fixate on Jodie Foster's thing. And he was so disgusted by how she was treating that he decided, if I'm going to go down killing somebody and kill it and die myself in this process, I'm going to do it for somebody who's good and for a good reason. And so he goes into that place never expecting to come out. And that's why in the end he's going, pew, pew, because he just, right? And he does that. He saves Jodie Foster in the end, and he gets the letter or whatever. He's still a paranoid fuck at the end. And he gets what he wants because Sybil Shepherd gets in his cab outside that place, and they have this kind of moment where she's like, "You doing okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm getting it together." But he's still the same guy, still the same fucking guy. And you're left to wonder, is the Jones of being famous for that going to lead him in a dark path now? And that's what that scene, I think, is supposed to mean. But ultimately, it's about an anti-hero who finds his way back, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The Godfather is not about that. It's about a downward spiral into pleasure and murder and power that somebody has, that it's intoxicated by it. Pacino's character starts off as a good guy, and then every decision he makes to stay in the family, they keep pulling me back in. No, you go. You fucking go. There are a lot of family members that aren't involved in this shit. They're out someplace in fucking Sicily growing olives. Fuck off with that nonsense. You go back. And that line isn't about the mafia. That line is about him making that decision, because giving up the power is the hard part for him. And it's ego. Yeah. And I've always said that, like, if people need to remember about criminals in general, the amount of ego it fucking takes to act out a crime on somebody, break into somebody's house. Imagine what it would take for you psychologically to go, I deserve to break into that car and take whatever's in it. Just think about that for a second. Think about what you would have to believe about yourself and that situation to do that.
Yeah.
Much less a house, much less a rape, much less a murder or an assault. You believe you are the most important person, and your existence, your comfort supersedes the life of another human being. Right? That and I think we've got, to end your point, because I this will be a rant, God knows, but if in the case of someone's, like, sort of acting on that arrogance, and this, a person like following that impulse to its worst possible ends, when we look at these anti-heroes and stuff, and the idea that it forgives this behavior or psychoanalyzes it or says it's really out of your control, what it does is it takes the responsibility off you for following your worst impulses. When it's your ass, it's you're responsible for it, especially at this point. And that kind of goes to what I was talking about earlier, that at 30, if you're still blaming your parents, you're a dick. But if you're 70 and other people are making excuses for you because of your parents, you've surrounded yourself with idiots of that ilk. And to me, I just say no. Like, somebody's got to draw, have a hard line someplace, and I have it. I hate those fucking shows. I hated The Sopranos. I wanted that fucking family wiped out and locked up. I hated Breaking Bad. After the first, 5 episodes, I was like, where is this going? And then I was like, what the fuck? He just watches this girl die, this addict. You know, like this is not why people of my ilk talk about like safe needle exchange programs and safe places to use and diversionary sentencing so that people can get help instead of going to prison, so that I can cheer for a dude who stands there while a girl chokes on her own vomit like fucking Jimi Hendrix. No, 100 times no. It's okay to have that. No. And I will not have my empathy fucked without its permission by a bunch of people who, quite frankly, just don't know how to write a hero anymore.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And it's, you know, I love those shows. But at the same time, I find myself, and Kimberly and I are binge watching Succession right now, which is where the Kendall Roy reference came up a second ago. And so we're watching this show and I'm...
Whoa, hold on. What the heck? Hold on, your mic just went haywire for a second. Not quite sure why. That was crazy. Oh, there it is.
All right, good.
Oh, you're very quiet, but you're there.
Test.
Wow, that was weird. Let's see. Check again for me.
Test 1, 2, 3.
You're there, but you're super quiet. Can you bring your volume up?
Yeah, I can. I wonder what's going on.
Let's see.
I didn't touch anything here.
Hold on, I'll bring it here. Let's try this again. Check again.
1, 2, 3, 4. Is that
there you go.
loud enough?
That's better. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
You were at watching. Yeah, the Lord disapproves of your viewing habits and does not want you to speak your piece, young Bob Seska, little Bobby. So
right.
You were saying you guys binge watching.
I mean, I understand. Yeah, I understand the contradiction and the idea that I'm enjoying this show, and at the same time, these are horrible people that I'm watching. These are terrible people who do terrible things, and I find myself constantly having to remind myself of that. And you know what? It's the strangest thing, kind of deviating into the world of comic book movies and Star Wars, and Star Wars specifically.
Yep.
Where I find that a lot of modern Star Wars, which I also like, is taking this weird turn where they're asking us to empathize with the Empire,
right?
With the villains on the show.
Yes.
And that's become an ongoing theme, no matter what the series is or what the movie. Well, maybe the movie's not so much, but
this started at Return of the Jedi because fucking poor Darth Vader. They're still cutting you. I see it. He blew up a planet with billions of people on it. And didn't fucking he was Goebbels. He was the guy who carried out the Emperor's final solution. He built 2 Death Stars, you fucking assholes. Look, I don't give a shit if his son thinks he's okay now. He's not. And the only reason he stopped the Emperor was because the Emperor was killing his fucking kid.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess we're supposed to suspend our disbelief to the point where this guy can be redeemed because he's turned back to the good side. But again, he's a genocidal maniac who just gratuitously, I mean, he killed younglings, for God's sake. And and by the way,
and then we go back to his childhood, like the Sand People were bad to him. Or the Sand People were bad to everybody on Tatooine. Everybody on Tatooine knows the Tusken Raiders murder people and take them. He wasn't fucking special. Oh God, it drives me crazy. But the idea that,
in fact, Kimberly and I were having this conversation on my Patreon show on Friday, the after party. And of course, she was completely blanking out as I was talking about all this stuff because she's not into it. But I was talking about how there's this fan theory, there's this sort of what if idea in Star Wars where what if Anakin Skywalker survived that last lightsaber duel with Luke Skywalker at the end of Return of the Jedi? Had he not died, what would have happened to Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader at that point? And there's like lots of ideas. Well, of course, he would become part of the Rebel Alliance and part of the New Republic and things like that. He would join Han and Leia and Luke, and they would go do things together. Like, you know what? If liberals were around, like if American liberals of right now were around in Star Wars and that Star Wars universe at the tail end of Return of the Jedi, and Anakin had lived, we'd all be screaming, that guy has to be executed. That guy has to go to prison. And why isn't Merrick Garland investigating him? And, you know, the whole thing.
For fuck's sake, that's like saying, what if Hitler had missed his own head and only set Ava on fire? Like, get the fuck out of here.
Right, right.
No,
Yeah,
no,
but I
and
mean,
here's the thing. I believe in the personal redemption aspect of it, but that's theoretical. That's
mhm,
in emotional. On a material sense, that fucker decides to be put in carbonite forever, so he has a waking dream of as they pump in the names and dates of birth and death of every person on Dantooine, every person
Alderaan.
on Alderaan, yeah, and
Yeah,
like
all
every
those younglings, man, all
all the
those children of the Jedi Temple. Yeah,
right, all the people who were in the fucking ships that he was firing on as everybody was escaping Hoth. Get the fuck out of here! No,
right. Yeah,
no.
yeah.
And look,
Countless lives lost, countless worlds lost to Darth Vader.
yeah.
And
You
yeah,
know
what
what?
happens if Anakin lives? Would he be a good guy then? Yeah, sure,
No.
maybe, but we wouldn't let him be a good guy. He shouldn't be.
Would you
He
trust
should
him to
be
be
in
a good
prison.
guy?
Yeah, yeah,
Because he's been the chief priest of the dark side forever, and
right.
you think they're not capable of a rope a dope? You don't think
Hmm.
he's capable of pretending so that he's now the emperor and he kills? And by the way, first of all, let's all issues aside, let's recognize that George Lucas filled Star Wars with patricide and with like everybody's out to kill their fucking dad in one way or another, or watch their dad die. Whether it's Obi-Wan as a secondary dad, who's struck down as the good stepdad, or your actual dad who tries to murder you a bunch of times until he suddenly kind of knows. By the way, that was all bullshit too. There's no way Leia and Luke were brother and sister in the first movie. Or George Lucas would have gone to the studio and said, that poster you're putting out with everybody on the front looks very cool, but Leia's hands are fairly close to Luke's dick, and it's his sister. So maybe put him down by his knee or his ankle, not up on his fucking thigh like she's clinging to his schwanz. So don't get me started. The other thing is like he would have Thanos. I think he would have just went off and sat in some garden somewhere with his decrepit fucking head eating prickly pears while the rest of the fucking universe burns down. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
no,
Minimum
no.
security, kind of country club kind of style
Yeah,
prison somewhere.
right.
Yeah,
I just other than that, I have no opinion. Look,
slicing the garlic with a razor blade.
I have a hard time. This is the confusing part for me. Why do all the people, and I know my chat room is full of people who love some true crime, and I'm sure you've seen
Mm,
some of the bigger true crime stories over the last little bit. And never mind the fact that the making a murderer thing, which everybody thought pointed to the innocence of that particular guy, or Adnan Syed, which was, that one podcast pointed to his innocence and got him out. He's fucking guilty as shit, and so is the guy
yeah.
in Making a Murderer. And so we were all kind of hoodwinked. This is another that empathy rape that I'm talking about, where they take your best trait as a human being, which is your empathy and understanding of how a damaged person can do damaged things, but maybe have some a chance at redemption, and use it against you to pry awful fucking people out of the hole they've gotten themselves into, right? So yes, Adnan was
Yeah.
guilty. Yes, he's guilty in
Hmm.
my opinion. They're doing a new trial, but they've vacated the vacating of his thing. He's going back to jail. Of course, he fucking killed her. It's gross. Um, Anyways, the point is, I do think you're onto something, that this kind of fixation on anti-heroes
Yeah.
that people have had tempers everybody. It's weird because at the same time we've seen on the left kind of this purity test idea in the real world, right? That even the most
Hmm.
sympathetic people, somehow they don't get the same pass. The same honestly, the very same quote lefties that I know that love shows like Hannibal or watch The Sopranos or Game of Thrones or any things, and rooted openly for the anti-heroes in these fucking situations, have no sympathy for somebody who made a small mistake, but will shrug off letting Donald Trump get elected because the whole system's got to burn down and maybe he's the guy to do it, like Susan Sarandon would say, or
Yeah.
Jimmy Dore in this crowd. So that is the serial thing was bullshit. By the way, it was just gross and a horrible thing to do to that girl's family. It's just wanton disregard for reality around that case was just fucking brutal.
Yeah.
And I think it becomes all fiction at one point because people don't care. They don't fucking care. At one point, they're like, if you can be sympathetic for a character like Hannibal, and go, I don't know, I think he's kind of sexy and he's so smart. And I love how he kills the bad flute player, like, because that guy sucked. And like, and then you're gonna yell at me about elites? The fuck
Yeah.
out of here.
Yeah. We
yeah.
love our contradictions, don't we? We love to like sort of like kind of create. It's almost like that show. Oh shoot, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of it. Severance on Apple TV, which is one of my favorite new shows. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but Adam Scott and John Turturro's in it, Christopher Walken. It's a great show, and basically the idea of it is you have a work self and a home life self, and this technology has come along. It's a microchip that goes into your brain, and when you go to work at this one particular corporation, when you go to work, you forget your home life for the duration of time that you're at work. And then when you leave work, you forget the entire work day and you go back. So essentially what happens is you go to work and immediately you're leaving work again per your memory. So you're able to bifurcate your memory into sort of two people, essentially. Your home person.
Right. Everybody becomes a 1950s Fuller Brush salesman who fucks housewives on their route and, as they drive through the Midwest in an old jalopy.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think there's something profound about that insofar as I think a lot of times, and not to get too psychological about all of this, but a lot of times I think we can shut off that empathy or channel it in a way that is, I think, misappropriated. We channel our empathy towards awful people now. And I can't help but to think that and I'm talking about fictionalized people. We justify, well, it's just a TV show, so I guess there's no harm, no foul there. But I think over time it kind of, and again, I'm saying this as a fan of a lot of these shows. I think over time it has a desensitizing effect that leads to, well, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. How bad could that possibly get in 2016? And then you find out, and you're like, oh shit, that was a mistake. Maybe I should have thought that through. Or
you're absolutely right.
Awesome. I love folks. This. It's okay because Tony Soprano. It's okay because of Don Draper. It's okay because of Walter White. And so I think it's a bigger issue than we make it out. And I'm the guy who likes to go to the internet as being the patient zero in terms of where we are as a society, for good and bad. And I think just in terms of speaking of the bad side of that, I feel like the internet came along too soon in human evolution for us. I don't think we were necessarily prepared as a people to be able to accept and digest the glut of information online. And I think that has also contributed to this, the situation that we're in right now, because that was writ large during COVID, of course.
Right. Well, I've always been aware of my entire life. I've had this belief system since I was in high school, and I don't know where I picked it up or if I just made it up, but that there were, and it stems around someone in my family doing themselves in. And in my mind, I think of it as there's like 10, every decision you make and the way you act and even the minutia of your life, it's like 10 people sitting around a table in your head making decisions. And parts of them are your upbringing, parts of them are stuff you've read. One person at the table represents the TV shows you watch, but one person represents the books you've read or the religion you were raised in or whatever. And it's like a group, and whoever gets fed the most is the biggest person at the table, and eventually they make the decisions more than anybody else. And you might be able to dissuade them occasionally by feeding one of the other areas. But somebody who, like my cousin who did himself in, I was like, he just fed that person at the table, that person that sits there going, why are we alive? What are we good for? Blah, blah, blah. He fed that person till they were a bloated giant Jabba the Hutt at the table. And they made the decision, right? And so I've always been careful that if I see parts of my personality that I don't particularly want to have grow, like starting to expand or take over in my conscious awareness or decision making about stuff, I recognize maybe I need to either read something contrary to that or to balance it out, or to recognize that I might be overfeeding that particular thought form. And I would argue that the anti-hero thing is being overfed like fucking crazy. So while it's just entertainment, it's just a show, it's just almost every fucking show at this point. To the point where even the good guy shows the good guys are serial killers. They just happen to be killing the right people. Dexter is an obvious version of that. But effectively, the Equalizer, the movies, the Denzel movies, he's a fucking serial killer. If you really think about it, he walks in. What kind of a psychopath goes, I'm going to kill everybody here in 19 seconds? Click. And then kills everybody and goes 18. That's pretty good. And that's right. That's fucking insane. But he's on our side, so we like it. You can argue that Reacher is that way. The Reacher series, which I liked very much because it's very cut and dry, and they don't fuck around with the bad guys in that. They don't let the bad guys get all charming and cute. And I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but like they're exactly what they're kind of like when you meet them in real life. They're local towny assholes with way too much power who have raised a psychotic kid who would murder somebody, right?
Yeah.
So same with Rambo.
Well,
Rambo's a good example. Somebody said, "What about Rambo?" Yeah, Rambo is a monster who's on your side, and again, it's in many ways why I think I resonated with like the Captain America storyline in the new Marvel movies, and I didn't intend to. I was very much into the Iron Man angle of it. And I was not a Captain America fan, but the way it was played out and the sort of like Boy Scoutish energy to it, like you just take the loss and you stand up and it doesn't matter. You just do it anyways. And you don't sacrifice somebody else just because it'll make your job easier.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a brutal choice to have to make, right? And that's why I appreciate it. That's why I fell in love with it as a storyline.
Yeah, and I was thinking in terms of contradictions and the sort of things we justify. And for example, I'm as anti-gun as just about anybody. But I mean, there's a gun on my shirt.
Right.
I've got like little effigies of guns all in this.
I'm sure you have a Han Shot First shirt somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane, and I'm not excluding myself from these contradictions. I think this is something that's inherent to our culture and maybe inherent to humanity to an extent. And sometimes I wonder if that's being kind of weaponized against us, and we're kind of being led to believe that is like I recognize the contradictions in myself, and I go, well, that's something I should probably work on and improve. I should probably see if I can shed some of that, which you've done amazing work as far as your life philosophies and so on, to sort of separate yourself from all that. And I feel like that's a positive thing. If you're faced with these contradictions and you're working to escape from them, that's fine. But to revel in them and to be told that, no, that's fine. Don't worry about your contradictions. That's actually okay if you've got empathy for a serial killer. I think that's where the problem comes in.
I got in a couple fights in high school, let's just say. And I'm 3 black belts in my life. I know what I'm doing, to the point where I never want to have another fight again, because I know the only thing that would drive me to have a fight is a life and death situation, and I'm just gonna have to beat the person to death. Like, that's where you fall. And once you've trained enough, and boxers will tell you this, any MMA fighter in a real life situation, you'll walk away from everything, because the only choice you have is when you have no choice. And so everything else is a fucking joke, because real violence is just fucking awful. And most of the people I talk to who fetishize or sort of galvanize their position about violence as never the solution, has never been on the downside of a fight they did not pick. Physically, I'm talking about a physical altercation, or somebody who's been witness to or in an abusive household or something like that. When you recognize that in this moment, even if I just call the cops and everybody goes to a neutral corner, I'm going to be dead before they get here. And the reality of that, I think, tempers people's, understanding. And when you get out into the rural areas of America, that tempered belief about guns and the like is very different from cities, because cities, quite frankly, the cops are right around the corner. The more densely populated the area, the more cops there are within, a couple of minutes. But when you're out in fucking woods, like, if there were several times when I was home by myself, my parents would have taken 45 minutes if they were blazing a fucking trail from town to get to the house if something bad went wrong, right? Yeah. Much less I convinced some police officers that there was something wrong, and counties called the state police and had them come out, it'd be an hour and a half. So you have people out there who have, a different gun mentality because no one is riding in to save them. And then you've got this crisscross area, which is all over Texas and places like this, where they still have that mentality, but they live in a largely urbanized area. The suburbs have moved out from the city, and they really do have a cop fairly close. They really could call the police. They really could be okay, but they still have the mentality that I'm rural, I live out in the sticks, and if nobody, if I don't defend myself, nobody will, right? They still have that idea. They have gun racks on trucks. They only drive to the mall. There's a distance. They wear cowboy hats and they don't have any fucking cows. They don't even ride, right? You know what I'm talking about? Like that's where you get this kind of traditionalist idea, where, and again, this is worldwide. At some point, somewhere, some Muslim cleric fetishized women's hair and was known for snatching them up, with Afghan tribal leaders or something and raping women that had hair that he liked. So everybody went, look, whenever this motherfucker's around, cover your hair. And that later on translated out into cover your hair whenever a cleric is around, because we don't know which one he is. It doesn't quite matter. Maybe they're all like this. To any man who sees your hair is going to want to rape you, so cover your hair. You know what? Mm-hmm. Cover the rest of yourself. And because a burqa was effectively a self-defense mechanism against sexual assault in tribal areas. Just hide all of your feminine curves, because these dudes don't have enough women in their tribe, and they're just going to roll over and pick the best ones. So everybody's got to look vaguely the same, just draped like that. That's where that tradition came out of. There's a practical part of every long-term tradition, or it would have gone away. And the rural aspect of being out in the woods, people in the city don't know how dark it gets out in the fucking woods. They just don't. And so this gun idea in the United States is because we have a country that's got a variety of territorial needs and a variety of territorial social aspects, and close-knit communities that are spread far apart, and cities which are communities that are totally far apart. People don't even know their neighbors in a fucking city, but they're right there. So even if you don't know your neighbor across the hall in the apartment building, if you went boom, 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 there's a fire, or boom, 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 somebody's getting attacked, they'll call the fucking police. They don't have to like you to do it. In the South, everybody knows everybody goes to church, but you run to your neighbor's fucking house that's a mile away and bang on their fucking door, you're going to be greeted with a gun.
Yeah.
First, because they don't know who the fuck you are, and why didn't you call first, and what the fuck's going on. So this variety of beliefs isn't about some sort of accidental social structure. It's because we have multiple social structures constantly interacting as humanity moves forward in a technological sense towards a more integrated format, whether we like it or fucking not. Yeah. And that's where we find ourselves. It isn't so much that Americans don't have a short attention span. It isn't so much that, we're being led astray by this particular empathy rape that I talk about. It's that it's a perfect storm of those things, because they all kind of happen in concert, because they kind of stack on top of each other, because that's how they, and somebody say machine guns aren't required. I completely agree. But it's why these guys want a lot of clips in their magazine, or a lot of rounds in their magazine, because they believe the person showing up will have that many. They want to have one more than that person. And that's the mentality. It totally is. So, so I don't necessarily fault, and obviously America, from Dirty Harry to Han Solo's blaster, has a love affair with the gun, because it was the great equalizer. Pistols specifically used to be a woman's weapon, and the show The Equalizer, literally the reason the guy was the equalizer is because he was willing to use a gun. That was what he equaled that. He was an old man in the original show. He couldn't fucking fight anybody. But what made him equal to everybody was that he carried a gun. And it was a new version of Paladin, have gun will travel, that idea. And that and before that, it was the guy who could lift the biggest sword, because that could kill the person right away, as opposed to a little, a foil or something where it could go on for a long time and there were a lot of options for you to die. Somebody just coming up and basically whack and you're done. That guy was a beast, and so everybody was scared of him. And so that storyline's been around for a long time. But guns initially were an equalizer for women because they had multiple shots. and they weren't that heavy, and you didn't have to shoulder them, and you didn't have the kick of a big Winchester rifle on the range. And so, the Annie Oakley idea, women having a gun, that they carried around, hell, had too much coffee. For the record, I have not had any coffee this morning. Not a touch. Fuck off. As a matter of fact, I was like, I hope I'm able to do a show today because I haven't had a drop of coffee or anything. So
that's brave, man.
Yeah. No. I was like, I got 2 guests and no coffee. I fixed my girlfriend coffee and then I forgot. And then the show was coming in and I was watching stuff about the Israeli attack, which we didn't even get to largely. But I do think we have to watch this. I think you bring up something wonderful, and I've held you longer than you deserve to be held by anyone but Kimberly, is, oh, you bastard, just sipping coffee like the nerve.
So good. Delicious.
But here's the thing. All I would ask of people, and I think I'm a bit edgy. I need help. I may need some coffee. You think that'll take the edge off? Does coffee take the edge off? All right. Anyways, I think what it would serve us all is when we recognize, if you're saying it's just entertainment, then recognize that entertainment is not just, entertainment's not just there to keep you staring at a fucking shiny ball. You're not watching an executive ball clicker screensaver going back and forth. There's characters in this. There are storylines in this. There are problems and solutions and conundrums and shit that happen. So all I would ask in all these fuckers going, it's just entertainment. What I would ask of you is recognize that there's messaging in entertainment, and that messaging should reflect something in you, even if it's minor. Should go, how would I react in that situation? Would I go that far? And if the answer is yes, in an anti-hero story, you have some work to do on yourself.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah. There's just there's an inherent danger, and I think, again, I love the democratization of entertainment and so on. That's all great, but there's this blurring of the line between good and evil, where it seems like stories of 50 years ago, even that recent, were much more or much better bifurcated between these two worldviews, a sinister worldview and a do-gooder kind of worldview. And now it's all kind of blended together. 70s filmmaking had a lot of that. Certainly our generation has come up with quite a bit of it, and it's very dominant now in the entertainment that we see. So I just wonder if we're ever going to, and this is where your optimism, I think, will come into play. Do we overcome some of these human flaws, some of these downsides that we possess internally? So these glitches in our empathy, for example, do we overcome all of that to eventually flourish and maybe get to that kind of Star Trek style utopian future? Or do we destroy ourselves before we even get there because of all of these contradictions and flaws? And that's the kind of thing that I'm constantly thinking about, especially in the middle of the night.
I don't think we have a choice, because I don't think you get to the point you're talking about without walking through that valley. I think you have to go through the what are humans capable of? Am I capable of that as well? And then yes, I am, for a while, a recognition that we do share those traits, but that we reject them, and we reject them consciously and for good reason, and then you move past it. I think that's the moral arc of any person who's a decent human being. And just, again, if you just automatically came up that way and you're like, I would never, well, then that's because you were raised in a vacuum in this particular area. And if you'd been raised by the people who make Jesus Camp, you'd be a fucking monster, because you just kind of you go with whatever path was laid out in front of you. I really think that you can never underestimate the value and the voluminous nature of human beings being disgusted with themselves. And I think a big part of everybody's growth is regret, is owning the things you regret in your life and not running from them. Not saying no regrets because it makes you who they are, with this childish fucking 90s idea that, you shouldn't have any regrets because it makes you who you are. No. Having the regrets is what forms you into a decent fucking human being. If you did something you should regret, fucking regret it, and don't do it again. When you talk about somebody who has no regrets, that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump, literally, when he was asked by religious leaders if he prays or asks Jesus for forgiveness because he says he's a Christian, he said no, because he can't think of anything he would ask forgiveness for. Okay, that gets you kicked out of Jesus camp immediately because no one is sinless. I don't care whether you follow the Bible or not. No one is sinless. And the idea that you could be or you are is a very dangerous thought, because that's how you get autocracies. That's how you get religious fiefdoms. That's how you get Jonestown and Waco and fucking Pastor Jeffries and all that shit. You own your regrets and take pride in the things that you have outgrown. I feel like I don't know if you feel this way, and maybe this is a Gen X thing or whatever, but I felt like I've been like 4 or 5 people in my life. Like I look back at the kid I was in Kentucky, with dirt floor in one of the rooms and all that shit, and it seems impossible. And I can see that kid from a sympathetic view, but I'm not him. And I'm not the teenager who moved to Chicago and the stuff that I did there. I'm not that person. I own what that person did, but I look back on who I was then as kind of this abstract human being that existed in that timescape that I've moved through and to who I am now, because I'm not that person anymore. And that should be the point, and again, some of the things, by the way, it's not always good. It's not always, there are traits that I lost when I was a teenager in the 90s when things were particularly rough that I am working to get back. And my focus on optimism in my life has a lot to do with that being, beaten out of you by the industry. And I've always said one of the reasons why you should read self-help books and like, books that lift you up is because the world is always trying to knock you down. Everywhere, you will never run out of places telling you that you're going to fail and it won't work and everything's wrong. And, you'll never, that well will never fucking run dry. So you fucking have to carry buckets to the well of feeling decently about yourself and fill it up, both through information you take in and reflections of your own behavior in the world, people telling you that because you actively have done that thing, or the good works themselves that you can stand by and you can point to and you go, the world might tell me I suck, but I've done that and that and that, and I did it just for the sake of it being done. So I know that that's a lie, so I don't have to buy into what their version of me versus my version of me.
Yeah.
Somebody's like, try shroom salad's a quick fix and it works. No. I don't need any quick fixes.
Well, someone actually suggested that to you. Do they know you at all? Have they watched?
They do it all the time. No, everybody's trying to. Everybody is trying to secretly roofie me in my chat these days. It's like everybody's trying to sneak up and put something in my drink so that I can. Some of them just so I can't say I've never done drugs. Like, you've done them now. I'm like, no, I didn't do them. You did them to me. That's not fair. That doesn't count either.
That's true.
There's a difference. We do understand the role of consent in life, don't we? But yeah, so no, they do this all the time. It's adorable. But again, you listen to what I've said. I've had no caffeine.
Yeah.
And you want me to talk? You want my brain like this high? Are you fucking nuts?
That's right. I can't even imagine the aforementioned cocaine in your system would be just like
my nostrils are big enough.
An ongoing thermonuclear device, just exploding. It's like that, when in Oppenheimer, when they were so concerned about the atmosphere catching on fire. If House Marks gets cocaine in his system, the atmosphere will literally catch on fire.
And by the way, if it ever happens, somebody does it to me against my will, I'm going from 0 to Zaphod Beeblebrox in a fucking second, and I will never ever I will walk around dressed like Perry Farrell at the Met like every day of my fucking life. So like people need to go pound sand with that shit, because I'm one of the good guys. I don't yuck anybody's yum. I don't shit on anybody using drugs or any of that kind of stuff. But so leave me fucking out of it, though. Extend me the same goddamn courtesy.
Yeah, I've actually, strangely enough, I'm 52 years old, and I've never actually seen real life cocaine.
Oh, I have.
I've never actually been in the presence of a pile of cocaine.
All right,
I don't know. Is that what they call it? Is it a pile of cocaine? Is it? I guess they're lines.
It's a murder of cocaine.
I've never actually seen cocaine in person.
A gaggle.
That doesn't. I mean, I've had my fun for sure, but I've never. I don't know how that's actually happened. I've never seen it in person.
When I was 17 years old, I bullshitted my way into a set at the Comedy Store because I realized they didn't know that when I won the Funniest Teenager in Chicago contest, they didn't know that the show I won was at the Laugh Factory, not at the Comedy Store. So I was like, I wonder if I'll try it. Maybe they'll let me up, and they did, and they put me up on in the main room. And when I walked into the main room, first time in the main room, first time in LA, I go in there and they tell me where to go. My dad's with me. He's out sitting in the audience. And Louis Anderson's on stage. And I walk up and I go back behind the stage and I go over. And in the dressing room that's back there, there's this little piano, fake piano, coffee table made out of mirrors. And
I wonder what that's for.
And there's a little bar in that room. There was no bartender, but sometimes they actually have a bartender just for the big comics back there. And it was Sam Kinison and who else? Richard Lewis. So they were both there, and I walked in on them. And there's these little like dancing girl dressing rooms from when it was a cabaret, and then there's the backstage, and then there's this room. And you have to walk past you're walking behind the backstage curtain, and you can hear Louis as I'm walking by it. And there's light at the end of this tunnel, and you can't see into these little rooms. So I was like, I'm supposed to go there, I guess. So I go in there, and I walk in the corner, and there's Sam Kinison and Richard Lewis sitting at the this corner couch, and there's a pile of blow that looked like I thought I were filming a sketch. I literally thought
a Paramount logo.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, they're fucking with me. Like somebody told them, and they're like, get the powdered sugar or something like that. Nope, it was Coke. It was real Coke. They were blazing it.
Wow.
They were just railing off the fuck. And I was like, and I laughed because I thought it was a joke. And I was like, I'll be out here, guys. And I sat because I'm 17 years old. I sat down in one of the little like dancing girl, rooms that has like the little ring of light bulbs around it, and the little desk for doing your makeup, and and I just kind of sat there afraid until somebody called my name. I didn't even know who was hosting. I didn't even get a look at the fucking list to see what the order was. I was just like, shit. Half of it I was like the cops are gonna bust the place, anyways, I ended up doing what I said. It was a great time and whatever, but
I know myself, and I know that if I ever tried cocaine, I'd probably love it too much. It's a good thing that I've never been in the presence of it, because that cognitive enhancement, I think that side of it would be like, oh my God, I've got to have this all the time now. Yeah.
If I had stood there for 2 more seconds, they'd have gone like, they absolutely, they didn't care. They didn't know who I was. They couldn't fucking see me. They didn't know if I was 17 or 71. Didn't matter. All of a sudden I was upstairs at the Rainbow, like how did I die and go to the fucking tiny dining room at the Rainbow Bar and Grill? No. So, but yeah, so I've seen almost I've never seen somebody inject drugs in front of me. I've seen the paraphernalia at someone's house, but I've never, I've never been in the presence of that. And by God, I hope I never will be. Because again, I don't know how I don't take the thing and throw it away and shake that's just what I would do.
Yeah. That's even even more terrifying thing, I think, to see the IV drugs, because then you start to think about babies crawling on the ceiling and
Jesus.
You know what I mean? Like,
who needs
all the train spotting hallucinations. That's what I think of when I think
it's like standing up too quickly when you've been sitting for a long time, but for hours. Like that sounds it sounds great. Right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No interest. That's not my thing. And again, all I would say to some people is find someplace safe to do it if you're going to do it, and then stop as soon as you can. Because I believe in people. I believe in that the you that's there is already there, that it doesn't need any unveiling. Yeah. So that's all and again, people can disagree with me. I don't care. It's the same thing about Hannibal and fucking Game of Thrones and all that kind of shit. Fuck those people. No. Every episode of Hannibal I would watch is like, I hope they shoot him this episode. I don't fucking care. And the other thing is like, the people who are like True Blood and fucking intoxicating themselves around vampires. Fuck vampires too. First of all, ladies, anybody's like, oh, he's so sexy, he's a vampire. They feel like a dead person. They're corpses. They're cold to the touch. All vampires are cold to the touch. That makes you a necrophiliac that just wants somebody to put like an animatronic robot inside a corpse. That's gross. Quit it. And I don't want to hear you shitting on anybody's real doll, because it's the exact same fucking thing.
That's right. True Blood, but you know what? We should take that pitch out around town. True Blood, but with real dolls.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. Yeah, it's basically the same. It's just a personality real doll. You know how men will get a rubber sex doll that has big tits because that's what they like? You're getting a dead man with a sexy personality because that's what you want, I guess. And I guess corpses are stiff all the time. But that's whatever. And don't get me started on zombies as a metaphor for communism versus rioting poor people with AIDS. Yeah, we have to do at some point, my friend, on a separate time and a separate venue, a deep dive on some pop culture shit.
Oh yes,
because
we haven't done that today yet. I think we kind of jumped into that Venn diagram,
but we didn't start with that as the premise or whatever. I didn't. Yeah. This is just off the top of my head, me getting aggravated. Imagine if I had time to get aggravated. That said. We can all agree on one thing, I think. Mark Hamill is a lovely human being, and we're lucky to have
Bingo.
him.
Yes, agree.
And the Empire were wrong, and just because you have snazzy uniforms doesn't mean you should be in charge of everything. I think we learned that in World War II.
That's right.
And everybody in my chat owes me some Empire scalps, and I will have my scalps. So
now I want a Megaworldwide t-shirt that has those three things on it, right?
Oh yeah, right. Just like rubber guns with the barrels falling down. Yeah, that's right. The three things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect.
The Venn diagram of goodness.
And one circle is in just Mark Hamill. That's just one
himself.
Circle in the three things. Yeah.
Right. I got to get a picture taken with him. So it's just like one of those shitty, like duotone shots of me sneaking a shot with him some fucking place. He is a lovely human being, and I have to say,
he's great. I love Mark.
The fact that he and William Shatner both wish me a happy birthday on the regular is one of the weirdest fucking turns. Last question, because we're way over time, but I'm going to ask you this because I'm curious about this in your experience, because I've had this happen, and I'm in showbiz, so it's not that weird that things like this happen to me because I'm around some of those folks and I work with them and whatever. You don't necessarily. You're a pretty specific window where you are. Do you have any of the Mark Hamills in that group wishing you a happy birthday and those kind of moments where has somebody done something like that where you're like, oh, fuck, that's great?
Yeah. Yeah, I got a happy birthday greeting from Mark this year, which was just mind-blowing. And there was another thing that happened, I think last week. And of course, Twitter time all runs together. So I think it was last week. I'm not entirely sure. But there was this question going around, and this pertains to where you live. There was a question going around, what's the next band that should perform at the Sphere, which is that brand new gigantic venue in Las Vegas, right? With a gigantic video screen. And my first reaction was, oh, you got to have Spinal Tap play the Sphere. Because you got to have and everyone was like, yes, because of the gigantic Stonehenge monument. No, I said, no. You got to have the 18-inch Spinal Tap monument coming down on that huge screen where it just...
While a 404 screen happens all around the whole thing, where it's just page won't load, like a page won't load kind of screen, just while it's coming down, while it's lowering on stage, just glitch like that. And then
everything crashes midway.
All of its 90s pictures that slowly res in that are exactly the opposite of what you thought they were. Like, oh, hot chick. Oh my God, it's a dog in a mask with fake tits on it.
Yeah, that's right. So what happened was I tweeted, Spinal Tap should play at the Sphere next because they've got to play at the Sphere. Now I can't unsee that. And so Michael McKean, who plays David St. Hubbins in Spinal Tap, quote tweeted that and said, what could possibly go wrong? And then as though that wasn't enough, because it blows me away that Michael McKean follows me on Twitter.
Which is, by the way, how that's the first line in how they improv what the next Spinal Tap would be. So they create a premise and then they go, what could possibly go wrong? That's where all the jokes come from.
That's the inciting incident. Exactly. And then, and as though that wasn't enough, Michael McKean quote tweeting something I just wrote about Spinal Tap. Mark Hamill jumped into the replies and went, oh my God, you guys have absolutely got to play the Sphere. That is the greatest idea in the world. And so I was just like, work is done here. I'm out. Right. I'm off Twitter for a couple of days.
You have pegged the Gen X meter. You have absolutely buried the needle.
That's right.
He took PKE values right off the scale, buried the needle. We're very, very close.
That's
So the references we could have. Bob Seska, thank you
yeah.
so much.
Thank
Is
you,
it
my friend.
bobseskashow.com is the
Yes,
website, or just
bobseskashow.com. That is the
gotcha?
Patreon page that takes you
Excellent.
directly to my
Okay, and
Patreon.
you
So
also
yes,
have
please support.
bobseska.com as well, correct?
Yes, and that's
Yes.
just a repository for the podcast. If you
Yes.
can't find it anywhere else, and it's everywhere, just go to bobseska.com and it'll point you in the right
You
direction.
broke up a little bit then, but I'm thinking podcast suppository. I heard something like that.
Something
Anyways,
like that.
yeah, something like that. So yes, go to Bob Seska Show and join his Patreon. I insist. And thanks so much for joining me today, brother, and
Thank you,
helping
my
us
friend.
navigate the murky world of entertainment and both anger, annoy, cajole, and amuse the chat
That's right.
room as no other conversation will, because as divisive
Mhm.
as the conversation about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict could possibly be, start talking about Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones and whether or not they're good or bad as shows and worthwhile, and then you'll really get some fighting. Them's fighting
Yeah.
words.
The
That
flow
should
of
tell us
this,
something.
the flow of this conversation is very much like a Rachel Maddow A block. You start in one place and you end up in some place completely different. We started with the
Totally.
Gaza Strip and ended up with an 18-inch Spinal Tap monument, or a Stonehenge monument descending at the Sphere.
Right.
That is a conversation.
And people say ADHD is bad. Anyways, thanks so much, brother. I appreciate
All right,
it.
my friend. Take care.
Please join me again sometime. I would love
You
to
bet.
have you. Take care, and we'll see
Absolutely.
you soon. Okay.
You bet.
Bye. There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. So did we? And by the way, hi chat room. I didn't even get to say hi to you because Tara was here right out of the gate, and I just wanted to hold on one second. Why is this not going? There it is. Hi. So the question I got to ask before I leave chat room is: can we be divided about the value of or the dangers of certain types of entertainment and the meaning or lack of meaning behind certain things? Can we disagree about those things and still hug it out and walk away friends? I hope so. I hope this hasn't dug you in to some sort of, angle where I am forever perpendicular to your way of being. I hope not. I hope not. And thanks for getting Trian. Thanks for getting Tara's book. Excellent. And just know that when I say the things I do, there's a funny thing happened to me at a stand-up show a few years ago. A woman came up to me afterwards and she talked to me about one of the bits I was doing. It's kind of immaterial which one it was, but she goes, "Well, that's just your opinion." And I said, "Of course it's my fucking opinion. What do you think I'm going to do? Go up on stage and spend an hour telling someone else's opinion? Why would I do that? What a waste of your life force. Of course it's my opinion. And you must weigh it against what you know and believe as your own opinion." My problem with what that lady was saying was, I think your opinion about my opinions doesn't come from you. I think it comes from someplace else. So there. I think you were upset about what I said, not because you were upset, but because someone convinced you should be. Or you misheard me because you fixated on 2 or 3 words of what I said and missed the entire point. How do you like them apples? And if you're not careful, the kidney will come for you. What was that? Just happened. What was that? What happened?